Section 1. The Crayon in Homer's Brain. There is a quiet evening somewhere in Springfield. The kind of evening where the streetlights come on slowly, one at a time. Like someone with no particular schedule is moving through the neighborhood flipping switches at their own unhurried pace. The kind of evening where the smell of something on the stove drifts through an open window, and you can hear a television playing 3 houses down, and nobody on the block is in a rush to go anywhere or do anything in particular. The sky above Evergreen Terrace is going soft and orange at the edges, the way skies do when the day has decided it has asked enough of everyone and is now, finally and with something almost like generosity, letting go. The sprinklers in Ned Flanders' yard tick and sweep with the same reliability they have had for 36 years. A dog barks once somewhere in the general direction of the park, then thinks better of it. Inside 742 Evergreen Terrace, Homer Simpson is on the couch. He is not doing anything in particular. He is just sitting there, in the way Homer sits slightly sunken into the cushions, slightly sideways, one arm draped along the back of the couch like a man who has long since made his peace with the furniture around him. The television is on. Something is playing on it that does not especially require his attention, and yet he is watching it in the attentive, non-attentive way that Homer watches television present, theoretically engaged, absorbing without processing. There is a can of Duff beer balanced on the arm of the couch near his knee, and it is unclear whether he has taken a sip recently or whether he simply enjoys the company of it, the reassuring proximity of a cold can in a familiar hand. Bart is somewhere in the back of the house, doing whatever Bart does when nobody is monitoring him, which is a range of things that Homer and Marge have mostly stopped trying to fully catalog. Lisa is in her room, practicing a scale on her saxophone, the same scale she has practiced 1,000 evenings before this one, and the sound of it drifts under her door and through the hallway and into the living room, where it becomes part of the general ambiance of the house. It is not background noise, exactly. It is more specific than that. It is a particular and recognizable sound that belongs to this house in the way that certain sounds belong to certain places, not because they are always pleasant or because they serve any decorative function, but because their presence means everything is as it should be. Marge is in the kitchen doing something with something, the gentle and continuous sound of her activity a low rhythm underneath everything else. Maggie is in her playpen, watching the room with those enormous eyes that see everything and give nothing back. This is an ordinary evening. It is an evening that has happened 1,000 times before and will happen 1,000 more times after, in this house, in this town, in this show that has been running since before most of the people watching it were old enough to stay up past 8 o'clock. It is the evening that Springfield is made of. And if you settle in right here, if you let your breathing slow down, and your shoulders find their way down from wherever they have been today, and your mind stops reaching for the next thing it needs to grab hold of, if you can do all of that, or even part of it, you can just exist in this evening alongside Homer. You can let the sounds of the house become the sounds of whatever room you are in right now. You can let the warmth of the television light stand in for whatever warmth is nearby. You can let the ordinary and unremarkable persistence of 742 Evergreen Terrace be the thing you hold on to as everything else slows down. We are going to spend a long time here tonight. We are going to walk slowly through the moments in The Simpsons that were too specific, too oddly precise, too strangely knowing to have been accidents. The moments that a normal television comedy would not have thought to include, because a normal television comedy is not trying to tell you something beneath the jokes. We are going to move through them with the pace the evening sets, which is to say, without urgency, without any need to arrive anywhere quickly, giving each thing the space it deserves. If you drift off somewhere along the way, that is exactly the point. Springfield will be here when you come back. It always is. The couch will still have Homer on it. The sprinklers will still be running. The scale from Lisa's room will still be drifting down the hall. The town will be exactly as you left it. So, let us begin. Let us begin, of all places, in Homer Simpson's brain. There is a specific kind of courage that is required to look at your own intelligence honestly. Not the kind of courage people celebrate in speeches or commemorate with ceremonies. Not the courage it takes to run into a burning building or stand in front of a crowd and tell the truth about something uncomfortable. This is smaller and quieter and, in a lot of ways, considerably harder. It is the courage to sit with the knowledge that the version of yourself that the world gets to see is not the full version. That somewhere inside you, obscured from view by circumstance or damage or the particular way your life went rather than the way it might have gone, there is a sharper and more capable self. A self that did not receive the conditions it needed in order to grow. A self that now lives somewhere behind everything else, quiet and unreachable, the way a room in a house gets quiet when you stop going into it. The light still works. The furniture is still there. But nobody goes in, and eventually the room becomes part of the structure without being part of the life. Homer Simpson carries something in his brain. You know this if you have watched the show with any regularity, but the full weight of it is worth sitting with tonight, because the full weight of it is considerable, and it is the kind of considerable weight that the show tends to deploy without fanfare, trusting you to feel it without pointing at it. In the 12th season of The Simpsons, in an episode called HOMR, the writers decided to do something that was both ambitious and risky. They decided to explain Homer Simpson. Not to explain him away, not to produce a tidy psychological thesis that accounts for his behavior in the neat way that a certain kind of television loves to produce, but to give him a specific and concrete cause for the thing he is. To say, here is the moment, here is the object, here is the mechanism. This is how the man you have been watching for 11 seasons ended up being the man you have been watching for 11 seasons. And the answer they gave was not a joke. It was dressed up as a joke. It was introduced with comedy and surrounded by comedy and delivered in a register that allowed you to receive it as comedy if that was how you needed to receive it. But the answer itself, the actual information they placed at the center of that episode, was as serious and as sad and as carefully considered as anything The Simpsons ever produced. When Homer was a child very young, the episode shows him to us as a small boy with enormous eyes and the distinctive shape to his head that we know so well. A child who has not yet been worn by the world into the particular shape of the Homer, we recognize he pushed a crayon up his nose. The episode does not give this act any drama. There is no inciting incident, no moment of recklessness or despair. He pushed the crayon up his nose the way children do inexplicable things, out of a kind of pure and innocent curiosity about what happens next, the kind of curiosity that precedes the brain's ability to calculate consequences or weigh options. He pushed it up and it went somewhere crayons are not supposed to go. It became lodged in his frontal lobe, and it stayed there, and nobody noticed. Let that settle. You are in no hurry tonight. Let your body find the arrangement it wants to be in, and let that sentence just exist in the room with you. Nobody noticed. Homer went through childhood with a crayon in his frontal lobe. He went through adolescence with it there, lodged in the tissue that is responsible for planning and judgment and the higher-order thinking that is generally considered to be the organizing principle of an adult life. He met Marge with it there. He graduated from high school with it there, or did not quite graduate, depending on which version of the timeline you are honoring. He married Marge with it there. He became a father with it there. He went to work at the Springfield nuclear power plant with it there, and has been going to work at the Springfield nuclear power plant with it there every day of his working life. And not a single doctor in Springfield, through all the checkups and the hospital visits and the injuries and the near misses and the annual physicals that the plant presumably requires, ever found it, or found it and said nothing. The show never decides which is the case, and that ambiguity is deliberate and important, and we will come back to it in a while. The effect of the crayon, the effect that the episode makes clear and the series has always been implying, is this. It reduced Homer's measured IQ to 55. 55. A number that the show identifies, without comedy softening, as qualifying for clinical cognitive disability. Homer Simpson is not, within the established internal logic of this program, simply a man who is not very bright. He is a man whose intelligence was removed not gradually, not through laziness or poor choices or bad luck in the educational lottery, but specifically and physically removed by an accident that happened when he was too small to understand what was happening to him, and never restored by the systems that were supposed to be responsible for his care. In the episode, someone finally finds the crayon. A doctor examining Homer for something else, some unrelated complaint that brings him to the hospital in the particular way that Homer ends up at the hospital through a chain of events involving food, or a dare, or a moment of magnificent poor judgment, notices an anomaly. In the imaging, the crayon is identified. It has a name, it has dimensions. It is a physical object in a specific location in a brain, And now that it has been found, the obvious question presents itself. Would Homer like to have it removed? Homer thinks about this. The thinking is depicted with the gentle comedy that the show deploys for Homer's cognitive processes, the long pause, the effort, the machinery of his consideration visibly working harder than the question perhaps requires. And then he says yes. He will have it removed. What happens next is the part that the show presents as comedy, and that is, if you watch it in the right light with the right kind of attention, something considerably more than comedy. The crayon is removed, and Homer's IQ increases dramatically. The fog lifts. The man inside the man steps forward. And the man inside the man is remarkable. Not remarkable in a spectacular or theatrical way, not smart in the way that a montage would depict smartness, with equations on chalkboards and rapid-fire insights delivered in quick succession. He is remarkable in the most ordinary and the most heartbreaking way available. He is simply a person who can now understand things. He can follow the logic of a complex argument. He can read between the lines of a conversation and understand what is actually being communicated beneath what is being said. He can see cause and effect clearly without the usual blurring that makes the connection invisible to him. He can appreciate complexity. He can recognize beauty in things that previously were just shapes and colors and noises to him, things that were pleasant or unpleasant, but not things that meant anything. The show illustrates this with a scene that is, for my money, one of the most perfectly constructed and most quietly devastating scenes in the entire run of The Simpsons. Homer and Lisa go to a movie together. The movie is one that Lisa has been waiting to share with him, a film that is too layered, too subtle, too dependent on attention and inference for the Homer she has always known. She has been waiting, probably without quite knowing she was waiting, for a version of Homer who could sit next to her in a dark theater and actually receive what the film was offering. And now that version is here, at least temporarily, so she takes him. They sit in the dark together. The film plays. And in the middle of it, Homer leans over and makes a quiet, precise, entirely accurate observation about what the film is doing thematically, about the thing it is actually about beneath its surface narrative. He says it in a low voice, without emphasis, as a person says something they consider obvious, something they assume their companion is also noticing. And Lisa turns to look at him, and the expression on her face is not happiness, exactly. It is something more complicated than happiness, something that happiness is a component of, but that also contains in its full structure the specific grief of someone who is receiving something they have needed for a very long time and had half accepted they were never going to receive. She turns to look at her father in the dark theater, and she cries. Not dramatically, not in the way of a dramatic scene. Quietly, the way Lisa does most of her emotional work privately, with the composure of someone who has learned that her feelings will not be matched or managed by the people around her, and who has therefore developed the habit of managing them herself. She cries because her father understands. She cries because she did not know, until this precise moment, how much weight she had been carrying in the not being understood. How much of her daily life was spent speaking in a register that her home environment could not receive. How exhausting it is to be consistently, reliably, daily the smartest person in the room you live in, when what you most need is not to be the smartest person in the room, but to be in conversation with an equal, or, at minimum, to be in a room where your frequency has at least one receiver. Her father understands. For the first time. For a few weeks, temporarily. For the duration of the episode's plot, but actually and genuinely, he understands. And then the episode shows you the cost. Because the intelligence does not make Homer happy. This is where the episode stops being comedy wearing a disguise, and simply becomes what it is. A story about what clarity costs. The lifted fog reveals things. It reveals, with an accuracy that the fog had protected Homer from, the full picture of his life, the job that is absurd and dangerous, the employer who has been exploiting him for decades with the confidence that Homer is too cognitively impaired to fully understand what is being done to him, the town around him, full of people who are living inside the same fog, accepting the same small world, unable to see the gap between the world they are in and the world they might have, the world they deserve. The intellectual loneliness that Lisa has been living inside her whole life, that Homer can now, for the first time, actually see from a sympathetic distance, and that seeing it from sympathetic distance makes the loneliness worse rather than better, because he is now part of its audience rather than its innocent cause. He sees the full picture, and the full picture is, in a very specific and very honest way, not survivable. Not for him, not in Springfield. Not with the life that has already been built, and the people who are already there, and the choices that have already been made. And so Homer makes a choice. He goes back to the doctor, he explains what he wants, he requests, with the full and functioning intelligence that has been briefly restored to him, he requests the deliberate reduction of that intelligence. He asks for the crayon to be put back. He chooses the fog. He chooses 55. He chooses the couch and the Duff beer and the television and the donuts and the not quite knowing, because the knowing, the real knowing, the clear and unobstructed knowing is a thing he cannot carry in the life that is actually his. The show lets him make this choice. It does not present the choice as failure. It does not moralize about it or produce a character who tells Homer he is wrong. It watches him make the choice with the clear-eyed understanding of a writing room that has spent long enough with this character to know that the choice is not simple. That choosing the fog is not the same as choosing ignorance. That there are forms of knowing that are not compatible with certain forms of living, and that the choosing of the living over the knowing is not in every case the wrong choice. But before the crayon goes back in, Homer does something. He writes Lisa a letter. He writes it while the intelligence is still there, while the man inside the man still has access to the language and the insight to say what needs to be said in the way it needs to be said. He writes it not as a farewell and not as an apology. He writes it as an acknowledgement. He tells her that he knows. He tells her that beneath the fog, beneath the 55, beneath the daily imperfect and inadequate response to what she brings to the table, beneath all of that, something has always known. That the music she makes is real. That the thoughts she thinks are worth thinking. That the questions she asks about the world are the right questions, the important ones, the ones the world should be taking more seriously than it does. That the fact that he could not always show he was hearing her did not mean he was not, in some obscured and inaccessible way, hearing her. Lisa finds the letter after the crayon has been replaced. She sits on her bed and the house is quiet, and she reads it in the way you read something from a person who gave you what you needed at the exact moment they became unable to give it again. The letter is real. The acknowledgement is real. The person who wrote it is still there, somewhere behind the fog, still possessing what the letter demonstrates, even if he can no longer access it in the way the letter required. The letter exists. That is the thing to hold as you let yourself settle in for the evening. Not the sadness of the fog returning, though, that is there, and it is real, and the show honors it. The thing to hold is this: the letter exists. The acknowledgement was made. The full version of Homer, briefly present, used its window to say the one thing that most needed saying, and it is there, in Lisa's room, on a piece of paper, permanent and preserved against the return of the fog. The show's writers, the ones who knew too much, who thought about Homer Simpson with enough depth and consistency to produce this episode, they understood something specific about the nature of love in conditions of cognitive and emotional limitation. They understood that love can exist and be genuine and be substantial without being articulable. That a person can love someone deeply and completely and be structurally unable to express that love in the language the loved person needs to receive it. And that this gap, the gap between the love that exists and the love that can be demonstrated, is not nothing. It is, in fact, one of the most common and most quietly painful features of family life. Homer loves Lisa in a way that is real and large and completely genuine, and he cannot, most of the time, give her what that love means to him in a form she can receive. The fog is between the love and its expression. The 55 is between what he feels and what he can say. But the letter got through. Briefly, at great cost, with the window that the removed crayon provided, the letter got through. The rest of the evening in Springfield, the evening we are going to spend here together, is about all the other things that get through. The things that make it past the fog, past the limitations, past the structural constraints of life in a cartoon town that is also, somehow, more real than most real things. The things that the writers knew because they were paying the right kind of attention, and that they put in the show because they could not help themselves. Let the scale from Lisa's room settle into the background of your breathing. Let the weight of the day find its way out through whatever is beneath you. Let the orange in the sky over Evergreen Terrace be the last light of your day, too. Drop a comment right now. Tell us what time it is, where you are, and what part of the world you are watching from. There is something genuinely lovely about knowing that this is playing simultaneously in rooms the show's writers never imagined, in cities and towns and villages that Springfield has never heard of, on nights that Homer would not recognize, for people whose lives the show was never specifically designed to speak to and somehow keep speaking to anyway. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the moment. There is a long way to go tonight, and you are going to want to be here for all of it. Section 2. The town that keeps forgetting on purpose. There is a specific quality to the silence that comes after something enormous has happened. Not the silence before that is a different creature entirely, tight and held in and aware of itself, a silence that knows what is coming and is bracing for it in the practiced way of someone who has been through enough difficult things to know that the best posture for the approach of a difficult thing is a held breath. The silence after is softer. It has a different texture. It is the silence of a town that has exhaled. A town that has looked at the damage around it, the rubble and the disruption and the upended order of things that seemed, before the event, so permanent as to be beyond question, and has collectively and quietly, without discussion or ceremony or any formal process of deliberation, decided that what would serve everyone best right now is a return to normal. That the path forward from the enormous thing is not through it but around it. That the morning after the catastrophe should look, as much as possible, like the morning before it. That the fastest route back to functioning is not acknowledgement and processing, but the simple, dignified act of proceeding as though the enormous thing were already behind you. Springfield is extraordinary at this silence. It is, in fact, the most consistent and reproducible skill the town possesses. More reliable than anything else in Springfield's repertoire, which is admittedly a repertoire full of inconsistency and unreliability, more reliable than the fire department, which shows up sometimes, more reliable than the Springfield police, whose relationship with effectiveness is philosophical rather than practical, more reliable than the nuclear plant's safety protocols, which, as we have established, are largely notional. Exceeding all of these by a considerable margin is Springfield's ability to achieve the return to normal. The morning after. The version of the world that makes the day before yesterday feel like something that happened to other people in another town. Let your eyes be comfortable. Let whatever light is in the room be the light the room wants to have. There is no hurry here. The evening has a long way to go, and it is going to take its time getting there. The return to normal in Springfield is not, I want to be very clear about this, a passive phenomenon. It is not the natural result of time passing and details fading, and the organic process by which dramatic things become ordinary things become texture. The return to normal in Springfield is an active act. It is an act that requires, on some level, the daily renewal of a commitment from every person in the town. A collective decision made without a meeting, implemented without a vote, renewed without acknowledgement, the decision that says, we are not going to look directly at that. We are going to look adjacent to it. We are going to address everything around it and nothing at its center. We are going to proceed together as though it is already past. This is the great social contract of Springfield. And it is, the show's best writers understood, the great social contract of a great many places that look on the surface like ordinary towns. Because here is the thing about collective forgetting that is easy to miss when you are watching a cartoon. It is not unique to cartoons. It is not a feature of animated television or of sitcom logic or of the particular conventions of long-running episodic storytelling. Collective forgetting is a human technology. It is something that communities develop, usually without planning to develop it, as a response to the specific problem of how to keep going after something has happened that would, if fully confronted, require a level of reckoning the community does not believe it can afford. The Springfield nuclear plant had 342 safety violations. This is a canonical, established, on-screen fact of the show's universe. 342 violations. The town knows this. The town watched the inspection happen. The town saw the violation count. The town has been living downwind of the plant, literally downwind, in many cases. The plant's position relative to the town's residential areas is not an accident of urban planning for the entirety of its depicted existence, and the town proceeds. The town eats its breakfast and sends its children to school and goes to the bar on Friday evenings and watches the game and argues about local politics and does all of the things that a town does when it has decided that proceeding is the right response to the information available. The information is available. The information has always been available. The three-eyed fish in the river downstream from the plant is not subtle. The glow in the water on dark nights is not subtle. The quality of the air in certain directions from the cooling towers is not subtle. The town does not look at it. The town has developed, over decades, a sophisticated and reliable practice of looking adjacent, of finding the comfortable angle that allows all of the information to be present in the periphery without ever being directly addressed. Now, there is a legitimate and completely reasonable explanation for this that has nothing to do with the extraordinary or the conspiratorial or the deeply strange. It is exactly how long-running episodic television works. Each episode needs to begin from a recognizable baseline. The characters need to be in their established positions. The world needs to look like the world. The accumulated damage of previous episodes cannot be carried forward because the weight of it would make the show unnavigable. The episodic format demands the reset. This is true, and this is real, and this is not nothing. But the show's best writers, the ones who knew too much, who brought a level of observation and intentionality to their scripts that exceeded what the episodic format required. These writers were not content to let the reset be merely a production convenience. They were interested in what the reset meant, in what it said about the people doing the resetting, in the psychology of the community that wakes up every episode in a clean version of the world and seems, collectively and sincerely, to have processed and released whatever happened last episode without visible effort. They were interested in the choosing, in the idea that the reset is not merely what happens, but what is decided. That somewhere in the gap between the catastrophe and the morning after, the people of Springfield make a choice not consciously, not in any way that they could articulate if you sat them down and asked them about it, but functionally, behaviorally, in the way that the choice is made visible in their actions. They choose to proceed. They choose the clean version. They choose not to carry it. And the question that the writers were sitting with the question that required someone who knew too much to formulate clearly enough to put it in the show is, why? What is the cost-benefit analysis that a community performs beneath the threshold of conscious deliberation that produces the choice to forget rather than the choice to reckon? In Springfield, the answer is economics. Not money economics, though Burns and his power plant are certainly part of the picture. Emotional economics. Cognitive economics. The specific accounting of what it would cost to fully process the scale of what Springfield has been through, the contamination, the disasters, the political corruption, the billionaire's stranglehold on the town's infrastructure, the three-eyed fish, the dome, the human skeletons in the basement of the nuclear facility, and what the community would be left with on the other side of that processing. The math does not work out favorably. The processing, if pursued fully, leads somewhere that Springfield does not have the resources to go. It leads to the confrontation with Burns. The confrontation with Burns leads to the challenge of his monopoly. The challenge of his monopoly leads to the collapse of the economic structure that keeps the town functional. The collapse of the economic structure leads to a version of Springfield that the town has no contingency plan for. So the town does not start down that road. It does not take the first step. It exercises, collectively and daily and without discussion, the specific discipline of not beginning. This is the logic of collective forgetting. It is not irrational. It is, given the available options and the available resources, a perfectly coherent response to an impossible situation. It is what you do when you have identified the full picture and the full picture is unmanageable. You choose to see only the portion of it that is manageable. You tile the floor of your perception with the manageable version, and you live on that floor. And you maintain the tiling daily through the social contract, the unspoken agreement that this is how we are going to do this together, and that anyone who insists on lifting the tiles and looking at what is underneath is not going to be thanked for their trouble. The clearest and most explicit depiction of this mechanism in the show's entire run is the episode that fans have argued about for nearly 3 decades. The episode in which Springfield's collective forgetting becomes not a background assumption, but an explicit and dramatic choice made by the community in a forum, with a vote, and enforced by a legal decree. The episode in which the town's principal turns out not to be the town's principal. The episode in which Springfield looks at an uncomfortable truth and votes unanimously to make it illegal. We are going to spend time with this episode throughout tonight because it is the clearest window into the mechanics of how Springfield sustains itself. But right now, the observation to hold is simpler than the episode's specific plot. The observation is this: the town chose. It was not passive. It was not gradual. It was not the natural erosion of a difficult truth through the passage of time and the dulling of attention. The town looked at the truth and voted against it and tasked a judge with making the refusal official. The town made the forgetting into a law. This is the extreme version. The daily version, the version that runs quietly in the background of every episode from the first season to the most recent, is less dramatic but no less deliberate. Every morning in Springfield is a small vote. Every resident who wakes up and proceeds through the day without asking the questions, that the available evidence invites every glance past the three-eyed fish, every sip of water from a tap that tastes of something nobody has named, every day at work, under the cooling towers whose cracks have been patched with chewing gum, every one of these is a small vote for the clean version of the world, a small renewal of the social contract. And here is the thing that makes this worth sitting with in the quiet of a late evening. The thing that makes it more than just a critique of a cartoon town. We all do this. All of us. Not with nuclear plants, not with most of the Springfield specifics, but with the equivalent of them. With the things in our lives and our communities and our histories that, if fully confronted, would require a level of reckoning we do not feel equipped to manage. With the tiles we have placed over the difficult foundations. With the things we have decided, not entirely without reason, to proceed past rather than through. The return to normal is not a failure. It is a human strategy, a way of keeping going, a way of surviving the gap between the world as it is and the world as we can afford to acknowledge. Springfield is just very, very good at it, better than most places. Better than is strictly healthy, probably, but very, very good. The evening in Springfield has fully settled now. The sky is past orange and into the deep blue that precedes dark, and the streetlights are all on, and the town is in its nighttime form, which is quieter than its daytime form, but not, when you listen carefully, actually quiet. There are voices carrying from houses, and the specific sound of the town at this hour, which is the sound of people who have come inside from the day and are now in their indoor versions of themselves smaller, softer, less defended, settling into the specific comfort of the domestic. Springfield is proceeding, as it always proceeds. Across the surface of the clean version of the world, over the tiles that cover the difficult foundations, with the consistency and the confidence of a town that has been doing this for a very long time and has gotten very good at making it look easy. Let the evening proceed around you. Let whatever the day left in the room dissolve into the ambient warmth of the house around you. Let the things that need to be set down, at least for tonight. Some things can be texture. Some things can be carried differently in the dark than they are in the day lighter, less insistent, more willing to wait their turn. Springfield waits too. It waits very patiently. And in the morning, it will be exactly as it was before. Section 3. Marge's hidden grief and the language she never learned to speak. Marge Simpson hums. This is an almost invisible detail in the way that the most important things about a person are often invisible, not because they are hidden, but because they are so consistent, so thoroughly present in every moment of the observed life, that the eye stops registering them, the way it stops registering the quality of the light in a room you spend every day in. The hum is always there. It is there when she is cooking, and when she is cleaning, and when she moves through the hallways of the house. It is there when she is in the car and when she is at the grocery store and when she is waiting for something, waiting for the water to boil, waiting for someone to come downstairs, waiting for the evening to arrange itself into the shape it is going to take. She hums without lyrics, without recognizable melody, without appearing to be aware that she is doing it. It is a low and continuous sound that fills the space around her, the way ambient sound fills a familiar room, pervasive and necessary, and noticed only in its absence. The hum is one of the ways you know Marge is in the house before you see her. The blue tower of hair appearing around a corner is the visual signal. The hum is the acoustic one. Together, they constitute the particular sensory profile of Marge's presence. A presence that is, in the Simpson household, the closest thing to a structural element. She is the architecture of the place. Her hum is the sound of the architecture being maintained. But here is the thing about the hum. The thing that requires attention to notice and requires something more than attention to fully receive. The hum, when you listen to it with the kind of listening that late evenings permit slower, less goal-oriented, more open to what is actually there rather than what is expected, has a quality that is not contentment. It is not the absent-minded sound of a woman at peace with her surroundings, humming the way people hum when they are so comfortable in themselves and their circumstances that some of that comfort spills over into sound. The hum, if you listen carefully enough, has a quality of effort. A quality of maintenance, of active upkeep, of a person who is using sound the way you use a task when you need to keep your hands busy, not because the task needs doing, or not only because the task needs doing, but because doing the task keeps something else at bay. The hum is Marge filling the space around herself with something she controls, something reliable, something that responds to her breath and her state without judgment or demands. It is the sound of a woman keeping herself company. It is the sound of a woman who has, somewhere in the long accumulation of years in this house, with this family in this town, learned that the silence around her, if left unattended, will fill itself with things she is not always ready to deal with. Marge Simpson is one of the most carefully observed and most persistently underestimated characters in American animated television. She was designed, in the show's earliest conception, as a stabilizing force, the sensible center around which the spectacular chaos of Homer and the children could orbit without flying completely apart. She was patience, she was warmth, she was the clean kitchen and the prepared meal, and the advice delivered in a voice pitched to sound like safety. She was the adult in the room, the one who knew better, the one who maintained the standards that the household's male energy was constantly threatening to let slide. This is how she was used in the early seasons, and this usage was necessary and functional and, within the limits of the early show's ambitions, entirely appropriate. The character needed to be what she was in order for the show to work as a show, in order for Homer's antics to have the domestic context that gives them their meaning, in order for the family unit to be legible as a unit rather than just a collection of people sharing a building. But the writers who knew too much, the ones who were paying the kind of attention that reveals people rather than just characters, kept bumping up against the limitation of this conception. They kept finding, in the corners of their scripts and in the logic of the character as she had been established, the evidence of an interior life that the sensible center framing was not large enough to contain. They kept noticing that the stabilizing force was a person, that the architecture was maintained by someone, that the hum had a source, and the source had a history, and the history had things in it. And so, over the course of 36 seasons, and in the margins of hundreds of episodes, they drew something alongside the official portrait. Not, instead of it, the official portrait of Marge as the household's steady center is real and accurate, and the show never contradicts it. But alongside it, in the spaces between the scenes where Marge is doing what she is structurally required to do, the writers placed another Marge. The Marge who exists when nobody is looking. The Marge in the quiet moments before the hum starts and after it stops. The Marge who sits alone somewhere in the house and takes stock. Let yourself be very still for a while. The evening is doing its work. Let it do the work. The background of Marge's character, assembled across many seasons in the oblique and non-continuous way that the show builds background, not through biography but through accumulation, through the layering of details that fit together when you hold them up to the light but are never presented as a coherent package, gives us a woman who was, before she was Marge Simpson of 742 Evergreen Terrace, someone with a future that was still open. Someone for whom the particular shape of her life had not yet been determined. Someone who was Marge Bouvier, the middle Bouvier sister, in a house with a father who wanted the world to be more orderly than it was, and a mother who managed the gap between the world's disorder and the father's expectations, and two sisters who were performing their own versions of the available roles. Marge grew up learning specific things about love and its conditions. She learned that the most reliable way to receive affection from a certain kind of father is to be reliably calm. To be the daughter who does not create turbulence, who does not impose the weather of her own interior life on the family's atmosphere, who finds a way to want things quietly enough that the wanting does not disturb the domestic order that the father needs to maintain. She learned to be the still water, not as a suppression of self, not as something done to her against her will, but as a strategy, a way of operating in the specific family environment she was in, a way of being loved consistently. She brought this to her marriage. She brought it to Homer, who has, without meaning to and without quite understanding it, benefited enormously from the specific way Marge was shaped by her family, because Homer needs the still water. Not because he is consciously demanding it, not because he is aware of needing it, but because the version of the world that works for Homer is the version in which the immediate environment is reliable enough that he does not have to think about it. Where the floor is where the floor is, and the walls are where the walls are, and the person he loves is approximately predictable in the specific and comforting way that the people we depend on most are approximately predictable. Marge provides this. It is, in some ways, the most significant thing she does, more significant than the meals and the management and the problem solving, because those things could theoretically be provided by other means. But the particular quality of reliability that Marge's presence provides to Homer is not something the household could reconstruct from other sources. She provides it daily, and it costs her. The cost is not dramatic. It is not the cost of a martyr, not the cost that gets pointed at and lamented and eventually erupts in a confrontation scene. It is the quieter, more sustained, less theatrical cost of someone who is perpetually deploying their own resources in service of the household's collective functioning, and who does this so consistently and so effectively that the resources appear from the outside to be inexhaustible. They are not inexhaustible. They are considerable. Marge has genuine depth of resource, genuine reserves of patience and capability, and the particular kind of emotional stamina that keeps you going in situations that would exhaust someone less constitutionally suited to the sustained effort of care. But they are not inexhaustible, and the show, in its best moments, in the scenes where someone who knew too much was paying attention to what was actually there, shows you the moments when Marge reaches the edge. Not the big dramatic edge, not the breakdown scene, though there are versions of that in the show too, and they are handled with appropriate care. The smaller edge, the one that is barely visible, the edge that appears in a single frame, in a brief, unguarded expression, in the particular quality of the pause before Marge responds to something, the pause that contains, for the person watching closely enough, the full weight of what she is not going to say. These pauses are Marge's most honest moments. They are the brief windows in which the still water is still and nothing is moving in it, and you can see all the way to the bottom. What is at the bottom is not unhappiness exactly. The characterization of Marge as unhappy in her marriage misses the complexity of what the show is actually depicting. She loves Homer. She loves the family. She loves the house on Evergreen Terrace with the specificity and the permanence of someone who has chosen this place and this life, and who does not regret the choosing, even in the moments when she is most fully in contact with its costs. The love is real. The choosing was genuine. The marriage is not a trap, or a sacrifice, or a compromise she has had to reconcile herself to, but the choosing had a cost. Living inside a specific set of circumstances, even circumstances you chose, even circumstances you would choose again, has a cost that is different from the cost of circumstances imposed on you. It is the cost of foreclosure. The cost of the other lives that stopped being possible when this one was committed to. The cost of the version of Marge who never got married at 18 and went to college and developed the talents the show periodically reveals she has into something that the world had a category for. The show periodically shows us this other Marge. Not as a sustained alternative narrative, the show does not have the appetite for that kind of sustained alternative, but as glimpses. Moments when a talent surfaces and is briefly nurtured and demonstrates, to anyone watching, that the person Marge is was built on a foundation larger than the official portrait accounts for. She can paint, she can act, she can write. She can do things with her mind and her hands that go beyond the management of the household, and when she is briefly given the space to do these things, the quality of her engagement with them, the attention, the seriousness, the pleasure she takes in it is evidence of someone for whom these activities are not hobbies, but something closer to a native language. Something she thinks in rather than merely something she does. But the glimpses are always temporary. The talent surfaces, is exercised, produces something, and then the episode ends and Marge is back in the kitchen. Hum engaged, tiles in place, the still water restored to its customary stillness. The other Marge recedes. The other life closes back over. and Marge proceeds. She proceeds because she has decided to proceed. This is the crucial distinction, the one that the show makes carefully enough to be noticed by anyone who is paying the right kind of attention. Marge's return to the domestic is not a surrender. It is not a capitulation to forces larger than her will. It is a choice. Made fully, made with the intelligence and the self-awareness that the glimpses have demonstrated she possesses, made in the knowledge of what she is choosing and what she is releasing. She looks at the other life and she looks at the one she has and she chooses. Again, every time, the one she has. And the hum is the sound of the choosing. That is what I want you to hold as you let the evening deepen around you. The hum is not the sound of someone making do. It is not the sound of settling or suppression or the low continuous complaint of a person in circumstances they resent. The hum is the sound of maintenance performed with genuine commitment. It is the sound of someone who has decided, and who keeps deciding, and who fills the space around the deciding with a sound that says, I am here. I am still here. I am in this. This is the kitchen I am in. These are the walls I chose. This hum is mine. It is one of the most complicated and most honestly observed things in the show. It sits in every episode, in the background, unremarked and unremarkable, the sonic wallpaper of the Simpson household. And it carries, for anyone willing to listen to it as something other than background noise, the full complexity of a woman's chosen life. Let the hum be in the room with you. Let it fill whatever space the day has left around you. Let the complexity of it be something you do not need to resolve tonight. The kitchen is warm, the house is warm, the woman who maintains the warmth is maintaining it. And the evening holds all of it without judgment, the way evenings hold things gently, temporarily, without insisting on conclusions. The hum continues. End of sections 1 through 3. Section 4. Bart's report cards and the system that was never meant to save him. Bart Simpson's report card is a document that exists as a kind of institutional argument with itself. Not because of the grades are consistent, reliably, and dramatically poor across every subject in every semester of every academic year the show has depicted, and their consistency is itself a kind of statement about the relationship between Bart's intelligence and the institution's ability to recognize or engage with it. The grades are not the argument. The argument is older and quieter and runs underneath the grades the way the real structure of a building runs underneath its visible facade. The argument is this. The system is designed, technically speaking, to catch children like Bart. Springfield Elementary has, or should have, in the theoretical version of itself that justifies the considerable civic budget allocated to its operation, the mechanisms to identify a student who is not being served by the standard approach, the counseling resources, the different learning models, the assessment tools that look at how a child actually processes and retains information rather than how they perform on a timed test in a specific format that privileges a specific kind of thinking over all other kinds. These mechanisms exist. They are part of the official description of what a public school does with the full range of students it is given responsibility for. In Springfield, these mechanisms have been comprehensively, catastrophically, and in some cases, quite creatively defeated by budget cuts administered by the office of Principal Skinner, who is himself, as we have established, a person who may or may not be who he says he is, and whose relationship with the institutional identity he inhabits is more complicated than his laminated name badge suggests. But the budget cuts are not the whole story. The budget cuts are the institutional version of the same dynamic that produces the report card, a system that was designed, in theory, to serve all its students, and that has found in practice that serving all its students is expensive and difficult and produces outcomes that are harder to measure than a standardized test score, and has therefore, quietly and without announcement, narrowed its conception of which students it is actually in the business of serving. Bart falls outside the narrowed conception. This is not a controversial observation. The show makes it explicitly, in episodes that look directly at Bart's school experience and at the gap between what the school is theoretically equipped to do with a child like him and what it actually does. The gap is wide. The show knows the gap is wide. Skinner knows the gap is wide. The teachers know the gap is wide. Even Superintendent Chalmers, who descends periodically from his higher administrative altitude to observe and criticize and ultimately achieve nothing in particular, has been made aware of the gap. Nobody closes it. Let your breathing slow. Let the evening be what it is, quiet and patient and not going anywhere. Here is the thing about Bart that requires someone who knew too much to see clearly enough to put it in the show consistently across 36 years. Bart is not stupid. This is not a consolation observation. It is not the kind thing you say about a child who is struggling academically in order to spare his feelings. It is an accurate and specific and demonstrable characterization of a particular and real kind of intelligence. Bart is not stupid. He is, in the dimensions that the school's assessment tools do not measure, which is to say, in several of the most practically useful dimensions of human intelligence, extraordinarily capable. He is fast, not physically fast, though that is also true. Bart is the kind of child whose body is always in motion, who seems to have a physiological relationship with stillness that is fundamentally adversarial. Cognitively fast. He receives information and processes it, and produces a response in a time frame that is significantly shorter than the mean, and the responses he produces are often not always, not reliably, not in the format the school would prefer, but often genuinely insightful. The insights arrive packaged in ways that the school's format cannot accommodate, which is how they get recorded as wrong answers rather than interesting thinking. The packaging is the problem. The content, when someone bothers to unwrap it, is frequently worth finding. He is social in a way that is easy to overlook because the social skills Bart exhibits are not the social skills that schools reward. He does not raise his hand and wait to be called upon. He does not form the kind of structured, cooperative relationships that school projects demand. But put Bart in a situation that requires actual human-to-human navigation, put him in a context where someone needs to be read quickly and responded to accurately, where the social stakes are real and the reading needs to be right, or something bad happens, and Bart is often the most capable person in the room. He reads people. He reads rooms. He has the specific kind of social intelligence that comes from spending years in an environment where the rules are not in your favor and survival depends on your ability to understand, quickly and accurately, what each situation requires and how to position yourself within it. He is creative in the way that genuinely creative people are creative, which is to say messily, laterally, with no particular respect for the boundaries between categories, with a generativity that produces 10 ideas where a more disciplined mind might produce 2, and with an instinct for the interesting angle that the direct approach would miss. The ideas are not always good. Many of them are actively bad. Some of them are catastrophically bad in ways that continue to affect people for episodes after the original incident. But the generativity is real. The angle finding is real. The ability to approach a problem from the direction nobody expected is a genuine cognitive gift that happens to be deployed, in Bart's case, primarily in service of pranks and escape plans and strategies for avoiding the consequences of previous pranks. The school cannot see any of this. The school has a measuring instrument, and the measuring instrument is a test. The test measures certain things and does not measure others. Bart performs poorly on the things measured and extraordinarily on the things not measured, and the official record of his years in the 4th grade reflects only the things measured, which is to say, it reflects a story about Bart that is precisely as accurate as the measuring instrument permits, and no more. The report card says, Bart Simpson is failing. The report card does not say, in what. The report card does not say, compared to what. The report card does not say, by whose standard, serving whose purposes, in favor of which conception of what a child's intelligence is for. The report card just says, failing. And it says it in the same flat institutional tone that it would use for any other child who received the same numerical assessment, with no annotation about the specific and irreducible and perfectly real person behind the numbers. Principal Skinner has been reading these report cards for 36 years. This is one of the quieter ironies of the show's long run, that the man who administers the institution that consistently fails to recognize Bart has himself been failed by the institution of identity, living inside a name and a history that were not originally his, sustained by the collective agreement of the town not to look too closely at the question of who this person actually is. Skinner and Bart are, in a certain light, in the same situation. Their actual identities are incompatible with the institutional role they have been assigned, and the institution, rather than making the adjustment, insists on the role. Skinner insists on Bart's problem. He insists on it with the consistency of someone whose entire professional existence depends on the validity of the categories his profession employs. If Bart is not a problem, what is he? If the measuring instrument is wrong, what does that say about the institution built around the measuring instrument? If the report card is the wrong story, what does that say about the storyteller? These are questions Skinner does not ask. They are questions, in fact, that Skinner's institutional position does not permit him to ask, because asking them would require him to assess the institution from a position outside the institution, and the institution is where Skinner lives. The institution is who Armen Tamzarian became in order to have somewhere to be. And Bart sits outside Skinner's office with his chair tilted back against the wall, making the particular face he makes when he is not quite performing defiance and not quite dropping it, the face that sits exactly at the border between the two, which is the face of someone who has learned that defiance is useful as a performance and a liability as an emotion, and who manages, with the social intelligence the school does not measure, to deploy the performance when it is useful and set it down when the situation calls for something else. In the quiet of Skinner's hallway, with the chair tilted back and the afternoon light coming through the window at the angle it comes through at this time of year, Bart is doing what Bart does when no one is watching. He is thinking. The thinking is not like Lisa's thinking. It is not systematic, not structured, not moving toward a conclusion with the patient architecture that Lisa's mind builds. It is more like weather. It moves around. It changes direction. It is in several places simultaneously, and it is not trying to be anywhere in particular, but it is alive and it is active and it is covering ground that the school's curriculum has not touched and that the report card will never record. The teachers know there is something there. The best of them, and there are best ones, scattered across the seasons. Appearing for an episode or two before the show returns Bart to the baseline of institutional failure, the best of them see the thing that the measuring instrument misses. They do not always know what to do with it. They do not always have the resources or the mandate or the institutional latitude to respond to it in a way that would actually serve Bart rather than the school's need to categorize him. But they see it. The recognition is in their faces in the moments before the plot moves on, and they become again just another adult in the institutional landscape that Bart navigates with the expertise of someone who has been navigating it his whole life. There is a substitute teacher episode that is structurally parallel to the one we discussed about Lisa, the one in which Lisa finds a teacher who speaks her frequency and then loses him. In Bart's version, the teacher who arrives speaks a different frequency, not the intellectual frequency Lisa was seeking, but the frequency of genuine attention. The teacher who looks at Bart not as a problem to be managed or a grade to be improved, but as a person to be engaged, who responds to Bart's specifically Bart-shaped humor with actual laughter rather than disciplinary reflexes, who teaches in a way that assumes Bart has something to contribute rather than something to be talked down to, and Bart responds. This is the part that the show depicts with enough care to suggest that the people writing it had been thinking about what Bart actually needs and what the response to actual attention would look like in a child who has been receiving the institutional attention for so long that genuine attention feels categorically different. He comes to school, he engages. He produces, within the specific and non-standard parameters of this teacher's classroom, something that could, if it were being measured by the right instrument, be called excellent. And then the teacher is gone, because the show's honesty requires it. Because Springfield Elementary is not a place where the right teacher stays. Because the institutional logic that has been producing the report card for 11 years is stronger than the episodic exception, and because the episode needs to end somewhere, and the ending cannot be permanent change. The ending is the glimpse, the brief visibility of what is possible for Bart in the right conditions. And then the conditions change, and Bart goes back to tilting the chair against the wall outside Skinner's office. But the glimpse was real. The writers who knew too much put it in because they knew it was real. They knew that Bart's failure to thrive in the institutional environment was not a fixed property of Bart, but a product of the specific mismatch between Bart's particular kind of intelligence and the institution's particular kind of measurement. And they knew that what Bart needed was not discipline or remediation or the more intense application of the same instruments that had been failing him for years. What Bart needed was the thing that briefly appeared and then, per the rules of the show and the rules of Springfield, departed. What he needed was someone to look at the thing the report card cannot see. The show knows this. The writers knew this. And they put it in the margins, in the glimpses, in the moments between the D-minuses, in the look on Bart's face when he is not performing defiance, when the chair is tilted back and the afternoon light is doing its thing, and the institutional machinery of assessment is briefly quiet. The person in those moments is not failing. The person in those moments is waiting for someone to ask the right question. It is not Skinner's fault that he cannot hear the question. The institution built the measuring instrument before it built the capacity for other instruments. And the institutional logic is old, and it is heavy, and it is not something a single principle, even a well-meaning one, even one whose own relationship with institutional identity is more complicated than his name badge suggests, can simply decide to override. But the person is there, in the margin, in the space the report card cannot find. He is still there, 36 years into the 4th grade, waiting. Section 5. Lisa's saxophone and the sound of someone talking to themselves. You can hear it anywhere in the house on Evergreen Terrace. Through the floor of the upstairs hallway, through the particular plaster of walls that have been the same walls for 36 years and have developed, in that time, the specific acoustic properties of walls that know the sounds they are expected to carry. Through the kitchen, through the living room, through the space between the Simpson house and the Flanders house, where sound moves freely on warm evenings when the windows are open, you can hear it from the driveway, if you arrive at the right moment, which is any moment after school and before dinner, and frequently after dinner too, on the days when the saxophone is working its way through something complicated and needs the evening hours to arrive at the end of it. It is a scale. There is always, at some point, a scale. Sometimes it is the only thing the scale run again and again and again with the patient and seemingly inexhaustible repetition of someone for whom the repetition is not the means to an end but the point itself. The scale is the conversation. Each repetition is the conversation continuing, the notes checking in with each other, confirming their relationship, testing the intervals for anything that has slipped since the last time they were tested. Sometimes the scale gives way to something larger, a fragment of melody, a phrase that arrives from somewhere and is turned over and examined from different angles before the scale resumes, as if the melody needed to be tested against the baseline before it could be trusted. The saxophone is Lisa Simpson's most reliable companion, and the show has always known this, has always depicted it as this, from the first season in which Lisa's instrument was established as part of her identity, as surely as the red dress and the white pearls and the pointed mind that produces, in Lisa's family environment, the specific and chronic experience of being the only person in the room playing in the key that the room is not tuned to. The key difference is that the saxophone knows what key Lisa is playing in. The saxophone is tuned to Lisa. It does not need her to simplify. It does not need her to slow down or repeat herself or find the version of the thing she is trying to say that the people around her will understand. She plays a phrase and the instrument gives it back to her exactly, faithfully, in the full complexity of what she played, without reduction or adjustment. She is heard accurately, which is in the specific and chronic and daily experience of Lisa's intellectual life in Springfield not a small thing. To be heard accurately is the most important thing the saxophone provides. It matters more than the pleasure of playing, though the pleasure is real. It matters more than the social and emotional processing that the music facilitates, though that too is real and significant and one of the things that Lisa could not sustain without. The accuracy of the response is the thing. The knowledge that what she put in is coming back to her in the exact form she put it in, unfiltered, uninterpreted, not routed through the perceptual limitations of the people around her who love her completely and understand her partially. Let your eyes find their most comfortable arrangement. Let whatever the room sounds like be the room. If there is quiet, let the quiet be there. If there are the ambient sounds of your world, the sounds of the outside finding their way through windows, the sounds of the building, doing what buildings do at night, let them be present without requiring your attention. The specific loneliness of Lisa Simpson is one of the most carefully observed and most persistently underaddressed phenomena in American television comedy. It is underaddressed not because the show ignores it, the show returns to it repeatedly, across seasons, through multiple different framings and contexts, making it one of the most consistent themes in the series' entire run. It is underaddressed because the show understands that the loneliness Lisa experiences is not the kind that gets resolved, it is the kind that gets survived. the kind that a person learns to live inside rather than escaping, because the conditions that produce it, the specific and non-negotiable fact of being this intelligent in this family, in this town, are not conditions that change. Lisa's intelligence is not presented in the show as an unmixed gift. The show is too honest for that. Intelligence, in the Simpsons universe, is depicted as a thing that has costs proportional to its benefits, and in Lisa's case, the proportionality tilts noticeably toward the costs. Being the most intelligent person in her household means being the person most capable of understanding the full situation of everyone in the household, including the aspects of the full situation that are painful and that less intelligent people can remain comfortably unaware of. It means being the person who can see clearly where the household is functioning well and where it is not, what is being avoided and what is being confronted, what Homer is not capable of seeing and what Marge is choosing not to look at, and what Bart is substituting action for. She sees the whole picture. At 8 years old, she sees the whole picture. This is exhausting. This is a specific and particular kind of exhaustion that people who are significantly more intelligent than their immediate environment tend to develop, the exhaustion of full picture vision in a world that is mostly operating on partial pictures. The exhaustion of always having more context than the situation calls for. The exhaustion of being able to trace the consequences of things further out than anyone around you is tracing them, and of doing this automatically in the background as a feature of how your mind works rather than as an effort you are consciously making. Lisa is doing this all the time. The saxophone is where she puts the accumulation of it. The scale that runs down the hallway is the daily processing of a week's worth of full picture vision in a partial picture world, converted into sound, and released into the air of the house where it can become texture rather than weight. There is an episode from the earlier seasons of the show, one of the ones that people who have been watching since those seasons return to with a specific and durable fondness. The kind of fondness that attaches to things that were seen at the right age, and that said something that needed saying, in which Lisa acquires a role model. Not an accidental one, not someone thrust into her life by the episode's plot machinery, but a deliberate and chosen and deeply felt one. A musician, a genuine jazz musician, whose relationship with the saxophone is the thing that Lisa recognizes and is recognized by. Who plays in the key Lisa is playing in? Who hears what she plays and responds to it, not with the polite encouragement that well-meaning adults produce when they are faced with exceptional children and are trying to do right by them without quite knowing how, but with genuine engagement, the engagement of someone who is actually present at the frequency where Lisa is broadcasting. The episode gives Lisa a brief period of actual musical conversation, of playing with someone rather than into the air of her room, of having the thing she puts out received and returned and responded to in kind. It is a brief period, and it has complications, and the show is honest about the complications the hero, examined closely, has the limitations that heroes always have, the specific smallness that emerges when the person is viewed at closer range than the heroic frame permits. The man is fallible and human, and the connection, while real, is also temporary, in the way that connections formed in an episode tend to be temporary in Springfield. But the musical conversation was real. The being heard at the right frequency was real. And Lisa carries it with her in the specific way that rare things are carried not as a comfortable possession, but as a kind of benchmark, a proof of concept. Evidence that the conversation she has been playing toward, the conversation that the saxophone has been practicing for in its years of daily scales, is a possible thing. That there is someone, somewhere, who can receive her at the register she plays in. That the frequency is not only in her imagination. The scale she plays after that episode, and this is something you would only notice if you were watching with the kind of attention that the show does not ask for, but rewards the scale she plays in the days after the connection has ended and the teacher has moved on and her room is hers again. And the saxophone is the only listener. The scale has a quality that is different from the scale before. Not technically different, Lisa's technical precision does not waver, but emotionally different, more assured, more like someone playing towards something real rather than playing into the undifferentiated void. She knows now that the void is not undifferentiated, that somewhere in it, in some direction the scale has not yet found, is the reception it is practicing for. That the daily work of the scale is not simply the maintenance of skill, it is also the maintenance of faith. The faith that the frequency has a destination, that the signal is going somewhere, that the years of playing into the air of her room are laying down something that will eventually find its audience. This is the specific and quiet courage of Lisa Simpson. Not the dramatic courage that makes good television, not the speeches and the crusades and the moments when she stands in front of a crowd and says the true and difficult thing. That courage is real and the show depicts it well. But the quiet courage is, in a lot of ways, the harder one. The courage to play the scale every day in a house where nobody is listening at the right frequency, in a town that has no category for what you are, and to believe not naively, not without awareness of the full picture, but with the specific and practiced faith of someone who has decided that belief is the most useful available posture that the playing matters. The parents do their imperfect best. Homer, on the days when the fog lifts slightly, when something breaks through and he catches a fragment of what the saxophone is saying, on those days he stops. He stands in the hallway and he listens for a moment with a quality of attention that is different from his usual attention, the one he brings to the television and the donuts and the beer. He listens with his face open and his body still, and the beer can in his hand forgotten because the listening is requiring something from him that he does not usually deploy. He hears something. He does not have the vocabulary to tell her what he heard or why it stopped him. He does not have the ability to walk into her room and say, "I heard you, I hear you, the thing you are playing is the thing I cannot say." He does not have any of this, but he stops. And the stopping is something. Even if Lisa never knows about it, even if the stopping is private and unannounced and leaves no trace in the relationship, even if the fog reassembles around him before he reaches the kitchen and the moment is sealed away, private and unreachable, behind whatever the fog keeps private and unreachable, the stopping is evidence of something. It is evidence that the signal, the frequency, the daily practice of the scale aimed at a reception that is not yet confirmed, the signal reaches further than the room. It drifts down the hallway. It filters through the fog. It finds, in the improbable interior of Homer Simpson's 55 IQ brain, something that responds to it, not with words, not with understanding in the form that Lisa most needs, but with stillness, with the involuntary pause of someone in the presence of something they cannot name, but cannot walk past. He loves her, and the saxophone carries it where his vocabulary cannot. This is the show knowing something. This is the show knowing, with the specific precision of someone who has been thinking carefully about the people in it for a long time, that love and communication are not the same thing. That a person can love someone completely and communicate that love imperfectly. That the saxophone is in the room not because Lisa has a musical gift, though she does, but because the family does not have a shared language for the things she most needs to say, and the saxophone is the instrument she found for saying them in a form that does not require translation. Let the scale continue to drift through the house. Let it be the sound of something that needs no translation. Let whatever you are feeling tonight be present without needing to be named. The saxophone does not require names. It requires only the willingness to let the sound happen and to hear it for what it is. An 8-year-old girl is playing the thing that keeps her together. The house holds the sound. The night holds the house. And somewhere down the hall, without quite knowing why, someone has stopped walking. Section 6. The Treehouse of Horror episodes that weren't horror at all. Every October, Springfield changes. Not in the way that Springfield usually changes, which is to say in the way that all fictional places change when the plot requires them to and then revert when the plot is done, but in a different way, a more formal and deliberate and ritually established way. The change in October is anticipated. It is prepared for. It is, in the specific language of annual events, looked forward to. The Treehouse of Horror. 22 minutes of storytelling that operates outside the usual rules. That has, since the first one aired in 1990, given the show permission to do things it cannot do in the normal run of episodes. To have the characters die, to have the world distort, to bring in the dark and the strange and the genuinely frightening, to pull the curtain back on the usual maintenance of Springfield's comfortable reality and show what lives in the space behind it. The format is 3 short stories per episode. Anthology horror, each segment a different premise, each one riffing on an established genre template: the alien invasion, the haunted house, the body horror, the supernatural contract, the monster transformation, the apocalyptic scenario, the technology turned sinister. The genre furniture is familiar. The show deploys it with the playful precision of writers who know these templates well enough to both honor and subvert them, who find the comedy in the horror and the horror in the comedy, and who are most interesting when they find, beneath both, something else. The something else is what we are here for tonight. Because the Treehouse episodes, at their best, and there are many best ones, spread across the annual run, the quality variable in the way that the regular episodes are variable, but the peaks very high. The best Treehouse episodes are not horror dressed up as comedy or comedy dressed up as horror. They are something else dressed up as both. They are the things the regular show cannot say wearing a Halloween costume. They are the difficult truths about the characters and the family and the specific human experiences the show has always been depicting. Allowed out of the house for one night a year in a disguise that makes them entertaining rather than confrontational. This is what horror does. This is what horror has always done. From the earliest ghost stories told around fires that predated writing by millennia, horror is the container for the things that are too frightening to examine directly in daylight. It wraps the unbearable in narrative structure. It gives the intolerable a face and a name and a set of rules, and in doing so, makes it survivable in a way it is not when it is formless and unnamed. The monster is terrifying. But the monster is also, paradoxically, a relief. Because the monster has edges, it has a location, it can be confronted in the third act. It can be defeated or escaped or survived. And even when it cannot, when the horror is the kind that offers no exit, the formlessness of what was terrifying has at least been given a shape, which is the beginning of the ability to live alongside it. The Simpsons understood this from the beginning of the Treehouse tradition. The writers who made these episodes understood that the October permission was not just a vacation from the show's normal logic, it was a different channel for the same signal. And the signal, in the best of the Treehouse episodes, is the same signal as the regular episodes: the family, the love, the grief. The gap between what people need and what they can give each other. The specific costs and rewards of commitment, the things that bind people together in ways that are simultaneously comforting and terrifying. Let the evening be fully dark outside whatever is around you. Let the comfortable dark be the frame. Halloween is a season that belongs to the dark in the way that no other season does. Not frightened of the dark, but hospitable to it, opening the windows to it, lighting candles against it while simultaneously inviting it in. There is a Treehouse segment that is structured as a Faust story, which is one of horror's oldest containers. The deal with the devil, the soul as currency. The metaphysics of the transaction, which presupposes that there is something inside a person that is more fundamental than the person, more essential, more valuable, and that can be transferred, traded, negotiated over, owned. The Simpsons version of this segment is famous enough that most viewers who have watched the show at all will remember it. Homer makes a deal with the devil who is played, with the show's characteristic genius for casting within its own world, by Ned Flanders for a donut. Because Homer is Homer, and Homer's relationship with donuts is one of the show's most stable and most precisely observed facts. The segment is structured as comedy. The comedy is very good. Homer continues to eat the donut even as the metaphysical consequences accumulate, because that is exactly what Homer would do, and the comedy lands because it is accurate. He goes to hell. Hell is designed for his specific relationship with desire, which is to say it is a place of infinite donuts, which is either punishment or heaven, depending on the configuration, and Homer navigates this with the particular adaptation strategies he brings to every impossible situation. But the resolution, the thing that ends the deal in Homer's favor and returns him from the infernal jurisdiction, is not a trick. It is not a loophole in the contract language. It is not Homer being clever, because Homer being clever is not really within the Treehouse's established rules for Homer. The resolution is this: Homer already gave his soul away, years ago, to Marge. At some point in the history of the marriage, not at a dramatic moment, not in a gesture that either of them marked or celebrated or could now specifically recall, Homer gave his soul to Marge, which means the devil's contract was invalid. The soul being traded was not Homer's to trade. The thing the devil thought he was buying had already been transferred completely to the person Homer married. The segment does not linger on this. It gets the laugh and moves forward, because that is the Treehouse way the revelation arrives, and the comedy catches it and carries it onward before it can acquire more weight than the segment wants it to carry. But the revelation is there. It is stated clearly, and what it says in the specific language of supernatural contract law, is something that the regular show would have to approach with considerably more care and considerably more scaffolding. Homer Simpson gave his soul to Marge, completely, without reservation. At some point in the ordinary course of an ordinary marriage, the thing that is most essentially him became legally and metaphysically, and in the eyes of whatever powers administer these transactions, hers. This is the most extreme and the most honest statement the show has ever made about the Homer-Marge marriage. It is made in the middle of a horror parody. It is made through the mouth of a demon in a courtroom in hell, and it is completely true to what the show has been depicting for 36 years about this relationship. The specific totality of Homer's commitment to Marge, which is not always visible in his actions or his words or his daily behavior, but which is, the Treehouse episode insists, the foundational metaphysical fact of his existence. He gave her everything. He gave her the thing that could not be taken away without his consent. He gave it without ceremony and without the expectation of being recognized for the giving. He just gave it, the way you give the most important parts of yourself to someone when you have decided they are the person you are giving yourself to. And the devil came along years later and tried to buy what was already claimed. And the courtroom in hell ruled in Homer's favor, and he went home to Marge with his soul intact, because his soul was already hers and had been for years. This is a love story. The show dressed it up as a horror parody and put it in the October anthology, and it is one of the most straightforward and most unambiguous love stories the show has ever told. Now, consider the segment about the third dimension. The one in which Homer falls through the wall of his living room into a CGI space. A space that is geometrically clean and mathematically precise, and entirely unlike the warm and slightly scuffed world of Springfield. A space that is beautiful in a cold and unsettling way, the way that pure abstraction is beautiful when it is removed from any context that would make it warm. Homer navigates this space with the specific combination of determination and bewilderment that is his characteristic response to impossible situations. He is trying to get back. He is trying to find the wall, the familiar wall, the wall of the house he knows. But the space does not cooperate with the direction of his efforts, because the space is not organized around his needs or his purposes. It is organized around its own logic, which is the logic of geometry and mathematics and the cold indifference of a universe that was not built for Homer Simpson or for anyone like Homer Simpson. And then he falls through again, into another space. Into a real-world street, not a cartoon street, not a Springfield street, but what appears to be an actual street in an actual city, with real light and real depth and real people who are doing real-world things and who stop doing real-world things when Homer materializes among them, because Homer materializing among them is not something the real world has a category for. He stands there. He is holding a glazed donut, because Homer is always holding a glazed donut in the moments when the world reveals its full strangeness to him. He looks around. He is in a world that is not his world, surrounded by people who are looking at him with the expression of people who have had their framework unexpectedly updated. He is recognizable but out of context. He is himself, completely himself, with nothing changed about who he is, but the world around him has shifted in a way that makes his selfhood look different, makes it visible in a way it was not visible in Springfield, where the familiar frame absorbed him and made him invisible in the specific way that familiarity makes things invisible. In the real world, Homer Simpson is strange. He is strange because he does not belong here, but he is also strange in a deeper sense. The strangeness of someone whose interior reality and whose external appearance are fundamentally at odds with the world he finds himself in. The strangeness of someone who was made for a specific context and who, removed from that context, becomes legible as the specific and particular and irreducible thing he is, in a way that the context had always prevented. The segment ends there. No resolution. No return. The next segment begins. What the show put in that ending, what the writers who knew too much put in that image of Homer on a real-world street with a donut and bewildered real-world onlookers, is a meditation on context and selfhood and the specific experience of being a person who is slightly out of phase with the world they inhabit. Homer in Springfield is Homer in his element. Homer in the real world is Homer stripped of his element. And what you see when you strip Homer of his element is not a diminishment, it is a clarification. You see what he is specific and uncompromised, standing on a sidewalk in a world that does not have a category for him and that is trying very hard to figure out what to do with what it is seeing. This is, beneath the science fiction premise and the horror framing and the CGI novelty, a deeply human image. It is the image of someone in a world that does not quite fit them, doing their best with what the world provides, holding on to the one thing they have that is familiar, the donut, the symbol of Homer's relationship with simple pleasure, with the immediate and uncomplicated satisfactions that do not require the world to be configured any particular way, and looking around with the open and bewildered and entirely characteristic expression of a man who is not sure where he is but who is. At some fundamental level, fine. He is still Homer. The world has changed around him. He is still Homer. This is what the horror framing allows the show to say. The regular episodes say it too, but more gradually, more distributed across many scenes and many interactions. The Treehouse condenses it into the 15-minute segment, into the single image at the end of a hallway or on a real-world sidewalk, and leaves it there without explanation for the audience to carry. There is a segment about a family that moves into a house that is malevolent. The house wants them gone. It manifests its displeasure in escalating and creative ways. And the family being this family, being these specific people with their specific and established responses to impossible situations, decides, after considerable debate and with a logic that is perfectly in character for each of them, to stay because the house is their house, because it is home even if it is trying to kill them. Because the alternative, leaving, finding somewhere else, giving up the specific and accumulated warmth of this particular set of walls and this particular arrangement of rooms, is worse. Even the malevolence is preferable to the loss of what is home. This is a joke. It is also a completely accurate portrait of the specific irrationality of home attachment. The way that a place over time becomes so thoroughly yours that its problems become your problems, its malevolence becomes familiar, its attempts to expel you become a form of weather rather than an existential threat. The way that you would rather be uncomfortable in the place that is yours than comfortable in a place that is not. The horror says this. The horror is the only format in the show that can say it as directly as the segment says it. Because in the regular episodes, the attachment to home is depicted through warmth and comfort and the pleasant version of its evidence. The horror shows you the same attachment from the opposite angle in its most irrational form, in its refusal to be overridden by self-interest, in its insistence on staying even when staying is dangerous. Same truth, different costume. Let the October light be in the room, if it is October where you are. Let it be the particular quality of autumn dark outside, denser than summer dark, more present, arriving earlier and staying later. Let the inside of wherever you are be very warm against it. The Treehouse episodes are the show being honest in its most dressed-up form. They are the writers saying the difficult things in the Halloween voice because the Halloween voice has permission that the rest of the year does not. And the difficult things they say, at their most honest, are love and commitment and home and what it costs to maintain them and what it means that the maintaining is done anyway. The soul is already given. The cartoons stands on the real-world sidewalk. The family stays in the haunted house. Same family, same love. October frame. End of sections 4 through 6. Section 7. The dinner table scenes nobody talks about. The dinner table at 742 Evergreen Terrace is not a remarkable table. This is one of the most important things about it. It is the kind of table that exists in houses all across America, practical, unpretentious, slightly scuffed at the corners where chair legs have made contact over years of daily use, surrounded by chairs that do not technically match but have been in the same arrangement for so long that the non-matching has ceased to register as a fact about them. It is a table that was not chosen for its aesthetic properties or its design credentials. It was chosen for its ability to hold 5 people and whatever Marge has made for dinner, and it performs this function with the undemonstrative reliability of furniture that knows its purpose and does not require recognition for fulfilling it. Tables like this accumulate. This is the thing about tables and houses where families eat together every day. They become something that new tables are not and cannot approximate, not through any transformation in their physical properties. The wood is the same wood, or the laminate is the same laminate, or Whatever material the table is constructed from is still exactly what it was when it arrived in the house. But the table has been in the presence of things. It has held the weight of 36 years of meals, and the conversations that happened over those meals, and the silences that happened in the middle of the conversations, and the arguments and the ordinary exchanges, and the extraordinary moments that arrived without announcement, and the 10,000 Tuesday dinners that are nobody's most memorable moment, and that are, collectively, the whole architecture of the family's daily life. The table has held all of this without recording any of it. It is simply there, having been where it is through all of it. A witness without memory, a presence without testimony. There is no object in the Simpson house that carries more of this quality of accumulated presence than the dinner table. The couch is close. The couch is where Homer lives in his leisure hours, where the family watches television, where Homer and Marge have their late-night conversations that the camera does not always follow them to. But the couch is primarily Homer's territory, the particular gravity well of his domestic existence. The dinner table belongs to everyone, equally, simultaneously, on a schedule that does not have exceptions. They come to the dinner table every evening, all of them. Whatever happened during the day, whatever the afternoon contained, whatever the state of each individual's internal weather when they walk through the door, they come to the table. This is the show's most consistent image of family. Not the couch sequence in the title credits, which is a ritual and a game and a self-consciously constructed piece of visual theater that the show has turned into a creative platform over 36 years of gag variations. The dinner table is not theater. The dinner table is the thing itself. Let your body settle fully now. Let whatever position you have found be the position you are going to stay in for a while. The table is set, the meal is on it. Everyone has found their chair. The dinner table scenes that nobody talks about, I mean this specifically, in the precise way that requires distinguishing these scenes from the dinner table scenes that do get talked about. Not the scenes that are the episode's dramatic centerpiece. Not the scenes in which a revelation is made at the table, or a conflict escalates into the territory that requires Marge to do the thing she does with her face when the conversation has gone past the point of comfortable management. Not the scenes in which someone returns from somewhere changed, or announces something that changes everything, or delivers the setup for the episode's central comic premise. Those scenes get discussed. They have quotes. They appear in clip compilations. They are clip-worthy, which is to say they are scenes where something specific and notable happens that can be extracted from its context and presented standalone. The scenes I mean are the other ones. The ones that are not extractable because they are entirely context. The ones where the episode's business has already been established and the characters are simply at the table, eating, talking in the way they talk when they are not being required to talk about something specific. Being the family in the specific way this family is the family when no plot is being served by their being the family. These scenes are the connective tissue. They live between the scenes that matter in the narrative accounting, and as connective tissue they are, by the logic of forward-moving attention, invisible. They are the scenes you move through while you are anticipating what comes next. They are happening while your attention is parked elsewhere. But what is in them? If you stop the forward movement and simply watch what is in them, is everything the show actually knows about these people. Everything that does not fit in the dramatic scenes, that cannot be delivered through revelation or conflict or the structured resolution of a comedic premise, that can only be present in the ongoing, unremarkable, daily texture of the family doing what families do when they are not being required to be anything other than themselves. Here is the specific observation that the dinner table scenes contain if you bring the right kind of attention to them. Every person at that table is having a completely different experience of the same moment. Not slightly different, not variations on a theme completely, categorically different, to the degree that you could argue they are not, in any meaningful sense, at the same dinner table at all. They are at 5 different dinner tables that happen to occupy the same physical space. Homer's experience of dinner is the most legible and the most complete. Homer eats. This is not a minimization or a gentle joke at his expense. It is the description of a fully realized and entirely authentic relationship with the act of eating total presence, total engagement, the specific and characteristic Homer quality of bringing his entire self to whatever he is doing in a given moment, reserving nothing. When Homer eats, he is eating. He is not elsewhere. He is not processing the events of the day or pre-processing the anticipated events of the evening. He is not monitoring the atmosphere of the table or tracking the moods of the other people around it. He is here, in contact with the food, in the direct and uncomplicated way of someone who has not developed the habit of mediating experience through reflection. The meal is the world is the meal, and the meal, in Marge's hands, is good. It is reliably and consistently good in the way that things made with genuine care and long practice are good, not spectacular, not the food of restaurants or celebrations, but the food of daily sustenance made by someone who knows the people she is feeding, and who has incorporated that knowledge into the making. Homer receives this. He receives it fully and without filtering, and with the specific and entirely genuine gratitude of someone who has not learned to take the good thing for granted, even after 36 years of its reliable provision. The meal is good. Homer knows the meal is good. The face he makes when the first bite lands tells you everything about how he knows it. This is actually a form of grace, not in the spiritual sense. Ned Flanders' grace at the dinner table occupies that territory more formally, with the folded hands and the specific words directed upward. Homer's grace is secular and unannounced and entirely real. He is present. The meal has his full and unambiguous attention. He is not squandering the meal on partial presence. He is here. Marge's experience of the dinner table is oriented around management. Not in the grim or administrative sense, the management Marge performs at the table is not the management of someone who resents the task or who performs it as a duty divorced from feeling. She derives genuine and specific pleasure from the successful management, from the meal that arrived at the right temperature, in the right quantities, with the right composition for the appetites of the people she feeds, from the satisfaction of having calibrated something complicated well. But the orientation is management, and that orientation means that Marge's experience of the dinner table is always slightly outside the dinner table she is at it, and slightly above it simultaneously, holding both the view from the chair and the view from the position of someone who is responsible for how the whole thing goes. She tracks the conversation, she monitors the atmosphere. She reads the states of the people around her with the peripheral accuracy of someone who has been reading this particular group of people for long enough that the reading is no longer effortful. It is simply a feature of how she perceives the table, like being able to sense temperature. She knows when Bart is building towards something that will require intervention. She knows when Lisa's participation in the conversation is genuine, and when it is the polite surface over a more complete elsewhere. She knows when Homer is happy in the simple and total way that Homer is happy, and she knows the other version of Homer's face, the one that appears when something is wrong in a way that has not yet risen to the level of articulation, and she adjusts her management accordingly, preemptively, so that the thing that was wrong does not become the thing that disrupts the table. She loves doing this. That is the detail that is easy to miss in the observation of Marge's management. She is not performing a duty she has accepted as the price of the family. She loves the orchestration of these people. She loves the specific and daily challenge of holding this particular arrangement of wildly different temperaments in a space where they can eat together without the evening becoming something other than an evening. It is her craft. The dinner table is where she practices it every day. Bart's dinner table is a performance space. This is not a criticism of Bart or an ungenerous characterization of his relationship to the family meal. It is the accurate description of how Bart relates to any social situation, which is as a context for the deployment of his particular kind of intelligence, the social and observational and performative intelligence that the school does not measure and that the dinner table provides. Every evening, an ideal venue for. He performs for a specific and well-known audience, whose responses he can predict with the accuracy of a comedian who has been workshopping the same material with the same crowd for years. He knows what will make Homer laugh, and Homer's laugh, full and immediate and entirely unguarded, is one of the most reliable rewards available to Bart, a confirmation of the connection that does not require any particular emotional vocabulary. He knows what will activate Lisa's specific brand of exasperation, which has its own pleasures as a reaction to produce. He knows exactly where the line is with Marge, the line beyond which the management face appears and the conversation redirects, and he operates along that line with the practiced precision of someone who finds the edge more interesting than the center. He is also, underneath the performance, fully at the dinner table in a way that the performance makes less visible but does not eliminate. He eats. He listens. with the specific and acute listening of someone who is always monitoring for information that might be useful. He is aware of the family, aware of Homer's actual state and Lisa's actual state, and Marge's actual state beneath the performance of being Bart at the dinner table. The performance is the surface. The presence is underneath it, genuine and complete, in the way that Bart is always beneath the performing of himself, entirely and specifically himself. Lisa's dinner table is the most interior and the most difficult to describe precisely because it runs on a frequency that the table's conversation does not always access. She is physically present. She eats adequately, if not enthusiastically, because the food is consistently good but rarely calibrated for her specific preferences, which are outlier preferences in almost every category, and which Marge, cooking for the center of the family's range, does not always reach. She participates in the conversation when the conversation offers her something to participate in, which is not consistently. She listens when she is not participating, and her listening has a quality that is different from the way the others listen, more analytical, more inclined to track the structural logic of the exchange, more likely to be simultaneously constructing the more accurate version of the argument, being made at a level of precision the table is not quite operating at. And she is simultaneously somewhere else. This is the specific and entirely characteristic Lisa dinner table quality, the partial elsewhere. The thread she is following that is not the thread the table is on. The internal conversation that is running parallel to the external one, picking up the things the external conversation drops, processing the family in the way that Lisa processes the family as a phenomenon. She is both inside and, through the quality of her intelligence, slightly outside simultaneously. Maggie watches. This is Maggie's constant and permanent and entirely deliberate condition at the dinner table. She watches, from the high chair, at the end of the table, in the position that gives her the clearest sightlines to the full arrangement. She watches with the enormous eyes that are the show's most direct image of observation as an active and purposeful act. She is not receiving passively. She is watching in the way that only the most attentive watchers watch, with the sense that every detail is information, that nothing at the table is happening without significance, that the full picture of what is going on here, not just what is being said, but why it is being said, and what it means about the people saying it, and what it tells her about the family she is in and the world the family inhabits, is available if she pays the right kind of attention. She pays the right kind of attention every evening. For 36 years, she has been paying the right kind of attention at the dinner table since the first episode of the show, and the accumulation of that attention, the catalog of dinners, the filing of observations against frameworks, the long and patient record of the family as it actually is, rather than as it presents itself to be, is somewhere in Maggie, all of it, behind the pacifier, behind the enormous eyes, in the silence that she has maintained long enough that it has become its own kind of language. She is the most attentive audience anyone at that table will ever have, and she has not told them a single thing she has observed. The dinner table scenes that nobody talks about are where all 5 of these simultaneous and completely different experiences of the same moment coexist. Where Homer is fully in the meal, and Marge is fully in the orchestration of the meal, and Bart is fully in the performance of being at the meal, and Lisa is fully in the elsewhere she occupies while being at the meal, and Maggie is watching, all of it simultaneously and filing every detail away in the silence she keeps. They are all here. They are all having completely different experiences of being here. And the family is entirely, completely, irreducibly intact. This is what the dinner table scenes contain. Not the drama is in the other scenes. The dinner table scenes contain the family itself, in its actual form, in the ongoing and daily and unremarkable and entirely necessary form that the dramatic scenes are framed by but do not themselves constitute. The dinner table scenes are where the family simply is, without being required to be anything else. The writers who knew too much knew that these were the most important scenes in any episode. The scenes that held the weight of the family, that established the baseline that the drama was departing from and returning to, that made the returning meaningful because the place being returned to was specific and real and constituted from actual daily detail rather than implied warmth. They put in the detail. In Homer's face when the first bite lands, In the way Marge's eyes move across the table in the pause between sentences, in Bart's calculation before the next thing he says, in Lisa's face in the moment her internal thread crosses the table's thread and she notices, briefly, that they are different. In Maggie's eyes moving from face to face to face to face with the quiet, thorough, entirely patient attention of someone who has all the time in the world and is using it well. They put it all in, and most people watch past it, waiting for what comes next. But it is there, every episode, in the margins, in the connective tissue, in the scene between the scenes. The table holds the family, the kitchen holds the table, the evening holds the kitchen, and whatever comes next, whatever the episode is going to do with the next 10 minutes the family has been here, at this table, in this arrangement, as themselves, that is enough. That is, the show has always believed enough. Section 8. Springfield's background characters who know too much. Springfield is a populated place. This seems, on first glance, like an unremarkable statement. All fictional towns are populated, in the sense that they have people moving through them who are required by the logic of a world that wants to feel inhabited. The difference with Springfield is not in the fact of population, but in the texture of it. Most television shows have main characters and secondary characters who orbit the mains with enough regularity to acquire names, and then the ambient human presence of a world that is suggested rather than actually constructed, the bodies in the background who make a space look used without themselves being specific. Springfield is different. Springfield's background is specific. The people who move through the secondary and tertiary and background layers of the show's world have, over 36 seasons and across hundreds of episodes, accumulated enough individual detail to constitute something very close to actual existence. They have names. They have histories partial, occasionally contradictory, assembled across many episodes through the oblique and non-continuous method by which the show builds all its background, not as coherent biography, but as the kind of information you accumulate about a place by living in it long enough. They have relationships that predate any given episode's plot and will continue after the episode ends. They are at the bar and the school and the church and the power plant and the quick stop and the hospital and the town hall meeting, with the specific and irreducible weight of people who have somewhere to be and who were somewhere before the camera found them and will be somewhere after it moves on. This specificity, this sustained decision across decades of production to give the background its own particular substance and its own distinct humanity is one of the things that makes Springfield feel like a place rather than a set. And the characters who populate that background are, when you look at them with the particular quality of attention they do not demand but entirely reward, some of the show's most quietly extraordinary creations. They are the people who know the most, in some ways, because they have been watching the main characters from the outside for the same 36 years that the audience has been watching them from outside, and they have had, unlike the audience, the opportunity to observe what the main characters look like in motion from the adjacent position of being in the same town. Let your breathing be slow and low and easy. The evening is doing its best work now, the work of making everything a little softer, a little less insistent, a little more willing to simply be what it is, without requiring anything. Lenny Leonard and Carl Carlson have been at the next station in Sector 7G for as long as Homer has been in Sector 7G. This is such a basic fact of the show's world that it has the quality of gravity, something you do not notice because it has always been there, because the episodes do not call attention to it, because the presence of Lenny and Carl in Homer's daily life is so thoroughly established that it has become part of the architecture of the show rather than a detail within it. They are there when Homer arrives at the plant. They are there in the break room. They are there after work, often, at Moe's, in the specific arrangement of friends who end up at the bar not because they plan to end up at the bar, but because the bar is where the day naturally deposits them, the way rivers naturally deposit things at their mouths. They have been there for 36 years. Think about what 36 years of daily proximity actually produces in a relationship between two people, or in this case, between three people, Homer and Lenny and Carl constituting a unit rather than a set of bilateral relationships. Think about what you know about someone after 36 years of sitting near them in a break room and eating lunch with them and sharing the specific and unglamorous hours of a working day in a nuclear facility. You know them in the particular and irreplaceable way of daily witnesses. You know what they look like when they are tired. You know the difference between the version of them that shows up on Mondays and the version that shows up on Fridays. You know the specific texture of their humor, what kind of joke they will laugh at, and what kind will not land, and why the distinction matters to them. You know their complaints, which are as consistent and as specific as a signature. You know what they reach for when the day has been difficult. You know them from the inside of the ordinary, which is the most complete kind of knowing there is. Not the knowing of crisis that knowledge is real, but it is not daily, and the self that crisis reveals is not the self that the person is most of the time. The daily knowing is the full knowing, the break room knowing, the Tuesday morning before the donut knowing. Lenny and Carl have this knowledge of Homer. They have accumulated it in the specific and unremarkable way that it gets accumulated through proximity, through time, through the daily deposit of small observations into the ledger of a long acquaintance. And the show has never made much of this directly, which is exactly the right choice. It does not produce dramatic scenes in which the friendship is explicitly named and honored. It does not give Lenny and Carl speeches about what Homer means to them, or vice versa. It trusts the friendship to be legible through its dailiness, through the specific ease of three people who have been in the same break room long enough that the being in the break room together is the relationship. The friendship is not something that happens alongside the break room. The break room is where the friendship lives, and the friendship is entirely itself in that location, and it does not require extraction from its context to be recognized as what it is. There is a detail about Carl that the show dropped into a later season episode with the specific understatement that the show uses for things it wants to land quietly rather than dramatically. Carl has resources. He has education, the kind that comes with options, the kind that the Springfield nuclear power plant does not require and that the break room at the Springfield nuclear power plant does not accommodate. Carl is, in the material and practical sense, living at a lower altitude than the one his credentials would support. He is choosing to be where he is. This information changes everything that came before it retroactively, in the way that revelations about long-established characters change the texture of everything you have already seen. Every break room scene, every moment at the bar, every unremarkable Tuesday in Sector 7G. All of it is now not the picture of a man who ended up where he is because where he is was where life delivered him, but the picture of a man who ended up where he is because where he is was where he decided to be. Continuously. Renewed in that decision every day he shows up. Why? The episode gestures at answers without fully committing to a single one, because the show is too honest to produce a single, clean answer for a question like this. But the gestures converge on territory that is recognizable to anyone who has stayed somewhere they could have left because the somewhere contained something that the leaving would have cost them. The daily companionship of people who know you in the specific and non-performative way of daily witnesses. The specific comfort of a break room where your presence is expected and your absence would be noticed. The friendship that does not require you to be your most impressive version of yourself, that accepts and has always accepted the Tuesday morning version, the version before the donut, the version that is just you in your work clothes being whatever you are that day without any performance of what you are supposed to be. This is what Carl chooses over the options. The break room. The daily ordinary. Lenny, Homer, it is not a small thing to choose. In a world that consistently equates altitude with worth, that grades lives by how far above the baseline they manage to rise, Carl's choice to stay at the baseline is either very simple or very wise, or both, and the show does not tell you which. It just shows you that he keeps making it. Mo Sislak and his bar occupy a different register entirely, but a register that the show has always understood to be in conversation with the same fundamental questions about what makes a life livable and what people build around the things they do not have. Mo's bar fails by almost every metric by which bars are conventionally evaluated. The lighting is inadequate for reasons that are structural rather than aesthetic. The bulbs are fine. The infrastructure is not. The cleanliness is the cleanliness of a place that is cleaned by someone who knows what cleaning is, but who has developed over decades a pragmatic relationship with what counts as clean enough in a bar that has been this specific bar for this long. The food, when the bar produces food, is the food of a man who learned to cook by watching other people cook and who does not consider cooking to be among the activities that define him. The cocktail menu is limited to drinks that Mo can produce with the specific equipment and the specific expertise he has accumulated, which is the equipment and expertise of a man who has been making the drinks people order for long enough that the recipes are in his hands rather than his head, but who has not developed any particular craft around the chemistry of flavor or the theater of presentation. And yet, the bar endures. Year after year, season after season, in a town where businesses fail with the regularity and the drama of Springfield's many municipal disasters, Moe's Bar continues to be Moe's Bar. The door stays open. The lights stay on, inadequately but consistently. The regulars are there. Homer is there. The bar is there. It is there because Mo is there. Because Mo shows up every day and opens the bar and takes his position behind the counter and becomes, for whatever hours the bar is open, the thing that bars are for, not in the sense of serving drinks, which is a function that could be performed by a machine and sometimes, in the history of American drinking establishments, has been but in the sense of providing a place where the accumulation of the day can be set down and sorted through in the presence of someone who is there to receive it. Mo receives. This is his primary function and his most significant skill, and the thing he performs with more consistency and more genuine engagement than he performs any other aspect of the job. He receives what people bring to the bar, the complaints, the small triumphs, the middle-sized disasters, the recurring stories that have been told in this bar enough times that Mo knows how they end before the teller arrives at the ending, the new developments in old stories, the old developments in new stories, the things that happen today that connect to things that happened before he receives all of it. Not neutrally, not with the professional blankness of a therapist trained to withhold response. Mo receives with opinions, with his own specific perspective on the material, often deflating, occasionally surprising in its accuracy, never calibrated to make the teller feel better if the teller's story is a story that does not merit the feeling better. He is honest in the specific way of someone who does not have the social incentives to manage honesty carefully. He says what he thinks. He has been saying what he thinks at this bar for 36 years, and the regulars keep coming back, which suggests that the honesty, however unvarnished, is part of what the bar provides that the alternative cannot. Mo is lonely. The show has returned to this fact enough times, across enough seasons, in enough different episodes that look at it directly rather than using it as background texture, that it has the status of something the show considers important. It is not a joke about Mo. It is not the premise of an episode in which Mo's loneliness is resolved by the end and then returned to as a default in the next episode. It is a fact about a person that the show is willing to hold without resolving. Mo is lonely in the specific and non-theatrical way of someone who has arranged their life around a gap and who has made a functional and even, in its particular way, a meaningful life within that arrangement, even if the arrangement is not the one they would have designed if the designing had been entirely in their hands. What Mo does not have is the love story. He watches Homer's love story play out at his bar, in installments, over decades, the arguments and the reconciliations, the Homer in trouble reports that arrive with the consistency of a periodic table, the celebrations that Homer brings to the counter with the same full and unmediated delight that he brings to everything that makes him happy. Mo pours the drinks for all of it. He is the closest outside witness to the Homer-Marge marriage that exists in Springfield, more consistent than any friend or neighbor, more present through the dailiness of Homer's visits than anyone except the family itself. And Mo has no love story of his own. The show has given him versions of them, episodes in which love arrives, carrying the specific and characteristic complications that love carries in Springfield, and then departs, and Mo finds himself back behind the counter, back in the receiving position, pouring the drinks for other people's stories again. He does not perform bitterness about this. He might, in the private accounting that he keeps behind the bar and that the camera occasionally glimpses, feel something in the territory of bitterness. But what he performs, in the daily practice of being Mo behind his bar, is not bitterness. It is the specific and unglamorous version of continuing that people who have decided to continue perform not triumphantly, not as an inspiration, but simply as the daily fact of showing up to the bar and opening it and being there for whatever comes through the door. The bar is what Mo built around his gap. The listening is what he does while the gap remains. The continuing is the life. Now Ned Flanders, who is in the background of every outdoor scene that takes place in the Simpsons neighborhood, because Ned lives next door and the neighborhood includes Ned's yard with its exceptional maintenance and Ned's fence and Ned himself standing at the fence or in the yard or at the mailbox with the consistency of a landmark. He is there. He is always there. He has been there for 36 years, and the consistency of his presence, accumulated across all those seasons, has given him the quality of something that was there before the show began and will be there after it ends, a feature of the landscape rather than a character introduced into it. The pleasantness is what you notice first. The cheerfulness, the specific and almost architectural quality of Ned's positivity. The way the greeting he produces at the fence is calibrated to a warmth that seems slightly in excess of what the encounter calls for, as though Ned is bringing to the everyday hello the emotional investment that most people reserve for the significant reunion. He is glad to see you. He is glad to see Homer, which is remarkable given the specific and documented history of what Homer has done and continues to do in Ned's direction. He is glad to see the street and the day and the morning and the mailbox. He is, in the specific and characteristic and by now thoroughly established way of Ned Flanders, glad. And the show has always known that the gladness is maintained, that it is not the natural resting state of the person behind it, but the product of a sustained and active and entirely effortful practice. We have discussed the behavioral modification of young Ned, the childhood psychiatric intervention that took whatever the original Ned was and restructured it into the Ned that Springfield knows, the Ned whose aggression was conditioned into compliance, whose anger was trained into patience, whose wildness was reshaped into the specific and precise shape of the man who waves at the fence. What has not been fully explored is the implication of that structural fact for every moment of Ned's adult life. If the pleasantness is maintained rather than natural, then every pleasant moment is an act. Not a deceptive act, not a performance intended to mislead. Ned is not pretending to be pleasant as a cover for something darker. He is being the person he decided to be, the person the modification shaped him toward, the person that the daily practice of choosing this orientation has made into something close to second nature. But it is second nature. The first nature is somewhere underneath it, still there, still containing the energy that the original Ned had before the intervention gave it a different shape. The question that the show never fully answers, and that the best of the Ned episodes stand in the vicinity of, without quite resolving, is what it costs Ned to maintain the shape. Every day, every fence greeting, every interaction with Homer, whose 36 years of low-grade damage to Ned's life would, in any person whose first nature had not been restructured, have long since produced a response of very different character from the patient good humor that Ned provides. What does it cost? The episodes that show the moments when the cost has exceeded the available reserve, the moments when Ned breaks, when the first nature surfaces briefly through the practiced pleasantness, when the accumulated weight of what has been maintained without acknowledgement finds an exit through the specific and recognizable seam of the breaking, these episodes do not answer the question directly, but they make the cost visible. They show you, in the specific quality of what emerges when the maintenance fails, how much is being maintained, and then it reassembles. The morning after the breaking is a morning like any other morning. Ned at the fence with the wave and the diddly and the specific warmth of the greeting that does not vary based on the events of yesterday because Ned has decided, or the modification has decided, or some combination of Ned and the modification has decided that yesterday is not the orientation. Today is the orientation. Today's fence. Today's greeting. Today's practice of the person he has chosen to be. This is, underneath the comedy and the neighborly sitcom convention, one of the show's most quietly serious portraits. The portrait of someone whose daily act is the conscious and continuous maintenance of a chosen self against the evidence of everything that would destabilize that self if it were fully acknowledged. Not denial. Ned knows what has been done to him and around him, but a specific and practiced form of forward orientation that is not the same as denial. The daily commitment to being who he has decided to be regardless of what the evidence would support. Whether this is strength or something else, the show leaves deliberately unanswered. It shows you Ned at the fence in the morning with the wave, and it lets you decide what you are looking at. And then there is Hans Moleman. If Springfield's background characters are the texture of the town, Hans Moleman is the texture's most extreme expression, the character who exists at the outer edge of the show's willingness to turn its secondary characters into instruments for specific kinds of observation. He is the tiny, ancient, nearly blind man who appears in the background of Springfield scenes primarily in order to suffer. He is struck by cars. He is buried alive. He is eaten by various animals. He is incinerated. He is crushed. He is hit by things that should not be able to hit a person and continues to appear in subsequent episodes, restored and ready to be hit again. He is, by the conservative estimate of anyone who has been paying attention, the most frequently killed character in American animated television history. And he keeps coming back, and nobody in Springfield has ever asked why. He once stated his age as 31. He appears, in every visual dimension, to be approaching his 90s. He is, if his self-report is accurate, a man who has been aged by something in the specific way that things age when they have been exposed to forces beyond what normal aging produces. Something in his environment has taken a 31-year-old and compressed decades of deterioration into whatever span of time he has been a resident of Springfield. The radiation theory has an answer for this. So does the coma theory, in which Hans Moleman is a background process in Homer's dream that Homer's unconscious mind does not allocate much maintenance capacity to, a character who keeps dying and regenerating because the dream does not maintain its minor characters with the same fidelity it maintains the central ones. And the collective denial theory has an answer for this. The town has agreed not to notice that the same man keeps dying in public and returning because the act of noticing would require the town to ask questions that lead to other questions that lead to the cracked cooling towers and the three-eyed fish. But perhaps the most honest answer is the one that does not require any theory at all. Hans Moleman keeps coming back because Springfield, at the end of every episode, is intact. The town has agreed to be intact. The people who were here at the beginning of the episode are here at the end, in their established positions, ready for the next episode. Even the background characters, even the ones who died during the episode. Even the 31-year-old who appears to be 90 and who suffered 11 separate fatal incidents during the episode and who will, when the credits have finished rolling and the next episode has loaded, be exactly where he always is, doing whatever Hans Moleman does when the camera is not on him, waiting for the next thing that is going to happen to him. Springfield holds everyone, the background and the foreground both, the daily characters and the intermittent ones, the ones who are named and the ones who are faces in the crowd. The town holds all of them, in the same amber light and under the same impossible sky, in the ongoing and unremarkable and entirely extraordinary fact of being Springfield, which is to say being every town and no town, everywhere and nowhere, the place that was never on any map and that you have always somehow been. Section 9. The love story between Homer and Marge that should have ended. Statistically, by every measure that predicts long-term relationship success, by every marker that the considerable body of research on marriage and partnership has identified as meaningful, Homer and Marge Simpson should have separated in the second season of the show. The show knows this. This is one of the first things to establish about the Homer-Marge marriage, before anything else is said about what makes it remarkable, or what makes it real, or what the writers who knew too much understood about it. The show has always known what it has. Not a love story in the clean and uncomplicated sense, not two people whose compatibility is structural, whose natures are designed to fit each other in the way that the best romantic narratives propose that the right people fit. The show has a love story built on the opposite foundation. Two people whose natures are not compatible in the structural sense, who approach the world through frameworks that are nearly orthogonal to each other, who would, if you ran the demographic and psychological and communication style models, come out at the low end of the predicted success probability. And who have been together for 36 years through every test of that probability and are still together and will be together when the show ends, however and whenever it ends, because the love story is the one thing the show has never been willing to conclude. Homer is impulsive in the specific and non-metaphorical sense. He encounters the world and responds to it without the intervening step of deliberation. There is no gap between his experience of something and his response to it. The experience and the response are simultaneous events, or so nearly simultaneous that the gap is not practically functional. He does not draft his responses. He does not review them. He does not consider their likely reception before deploying them. What comes out of Homer is what is in Homer at the moment of the encounter, full and unedited, and at the volume that whatever he is feeling requires. This is not stupidity, though it is easy to read it that way, and the crayon does reduce his capacity for the kinds of reflection that would produce a different relationship to impulse. But the impulsiveness is not reducible to the crayon. The crayon reduced the capacity for sophisticated deliberation. The impulsiveness is something else. It is a relationship to experience that has its own integrity, its own specific form of presence, its own particular way of being in the world that the more deliberative modes do not access. Homer's impulsiveness means that what you get from him is always what he actually is, not the managed version, not the version that has been filtered through the consideration of how it will land. The actual thing. Marge is deliberate. This is her fundamental mode, the organizing principle of her relationship to experience, the thing that is constitutionally her in the same way that impulsiveness is constitutionally Homer. She encounters the world and she considers it. She holds what she has encountered in the space between experience and response, and she turns it and examines it and locates it in the context of everything she already knows, and then she decides, from that vantage point of considered context, what the appropriate response is. The gap between Homer's response time and Marge's response time is not a small gap. It is a gap you could drive a season arc through. And the gap is not negotiable. It is not the kind of difference that can be split at the midpoint, where Homer slows down slightly and Marge speeds up slightly, and they meet somewhere in the middle at a pace that works for both. The tempo mismatch is structural. It is in the architecture of how they think. The show has never pretended this is not the case. The episodes that look at the marriage, honestly the ones that are not using the marriage as context for something else, but that are examining the marriage itself, looking at it directly with the kind of attention that reveals what it actually is, rather than the version of it that the warm family comedy format would prefer to present these episodes, know about the tempo mismatch. They depict the specific friction it produces. The moment when Homer has already fully processed something and moved on before Marge has finished her initial assessment of it. The moment when Marge's fully considered response arrives at a conversation that Homer has not only left but genuinely no longer remembers having. The way each of them, repeatedly, feels unseen by the other's timing. Homer feeling that Marge's deliberation is withholding or distance, Marge feeling that Homer's speed is carelessness or dismissal. These are the real frictions of this marriage. Not the dramatic ones, not the crisis episode frictions that the plot constructs to give the episode its stakes. The daily frictions. The ongoing and low-grade and entirely survivable friction of two people whose internal rhythms are different in ways that do not resolve. The friction that does not produce catastrophe but that accumulates over years of daily contact into a specific and recognizable texture of being in this marriage with this person. And yet they are still here. The texture has not produced separation. The accumulated friction has not exceeded the accumulated warmth. The specific and chronic difficulty of being these two people in the same marriage has not, across 36 years, outweighed whatever the other side of the ledger contains. What is on the other side of the ledger? This is the question the show has been answering, episodically and obliquely, and with the patience of a long-running program that does not need to make the answer explicit all at once, since it has many more episodes to continue making it in. And the answer, assembled from the margins of hundreds of episodes and the moments between scenes and the specific texture of the small scenes that nobody talks about, is not a simple one. It is not a list of qualities. It is not a compatibility index. It is something more like a weather system too large and too complex to fully describe, but characterizable in its general shape. Homer loves Marge with his whole self. This is the first element and the most essential one, and the show has demonstrated it not through declarations. Homer's declarations of love are real, but they are also, in the specific Homer way, imprecise and impulsively delivered, and not always well calibrated to what the moment calls for, but through the specific quality of his orientation toward her. Through the fact that when something good happens to Homer, Marge is the person he turns toward with it. Through the fact that when something goes wrong for Homer, Marge is the person whose specific presence makes the going wrong survivable in a way that nothing else does. Through the fact that Homer's baseline state, the emotional baseline from which he operates in all the episodes where nothing dramatic is happening to his marriage, is the state of a person who knows that Marge is there and that the knowing itself is a constant and reliable source of something that Homer's limited emotional vocabulary registers as comfort, but that is, in its actual nature, considerably more than comfort. It is the knowledge of being loved back, consistently, in the full awareness of who he is, without conditions or performance requirements, as the specific and particular and entirely himself Homer that he is. Marge loves Homer with the specific quality of love that long deliberation produces. It is a love that has been examined and assessed and confirmed by the same thorough intelligence that she brings to everything she does, and what that process produced. What years of looking clearly at Homer, and all the ways he is difficult and all the ways he is limited, and all the ways the marriage is harder than it would be with a different person, and then choosing anyway is not the passionate and consuming love of early romance, but something that is in several ways more substantial. It is the love of someone who knows exactly what she has and who has decided, with all the context available to her, that what she has is the thing she wants to have. This choosing quality, the deliberateness of Marge's love for Homer, the fact that it is not reactive or involuntary, but considered and renewed, is what makes the marriage legible as a subject rather than simply as a backdrop. A love that could be otherwise but is not, that has been tested by the full awareness of its costs and found to be worth its costs. This is not an uncomplicated love. It is a love that requires something, and Marge provides what it requires, daily, because she has decided to. The show understood this was the love story, not the romantic love story. The shows that were running alongside The Simpsons in its early seasons were mostly telling romantic love stories. Were using their central couple to demonstrate the warmth and the humor of two compatible people negotiating the daily adventure of being together. The Simpsons was telling a different story. The story of two people who are not obviously compatible, who have had to learn to be together rather than discovering that being together was natural, who have built the marriage rather than been born into it. There is a scene it appears in one of the seasons from the show's middle period, in an episode that is not primarily about the marriage but that contains, in the space between its primary concerns, this specific and small and entirely unhurried moment in which Homer and Marge are in the kitchen, not talking about anything important. The episode's plot has left them here, in the kitchen, in the evening, with nothing required of them for this particular beat except to occupy the kitchen and be themselves. And what you see in the specific quality of how they move around each other in this kitchen, where they have been moving around each other for decades, the specific ease of it, the way each of them has long since learned the other's spatial habits and has incorporated them into their own without conscious adaptation, is the thing that the show has been accumulating evidence for across all the seasons. Preceding this moment, the ease of people who have been in each other's way long enough that the being in each other's way has become a form of navigation, a form of knowing, a form of being together that does not require any ceremony because it is entirely past ceremony, entirely in the daily practice of the thing, entirely in the body rather than in the mind. Homer reaches past Marge for something in the cabinet. He does this without looking at her, without calculating the geometry of the reach, because the reach is familiar enough to be automatic. His body knows where she is without the conscious mind needing to check. And Marge adjusts, slightly, before he reaches, before the reach arrives. She has already moved to give him the space it requires, because her body knows where he is about to be with the same familiar precision. They do not comment on this. They do not notice it in the way that you notice things that are surprising. They navigate each other in the kitchen the way they have always navigated each other in the kitchen, which is to say the way you move through a space you have been moving through for a very long time, with the knowledge in the body that is older and more reliable than the knowledge in the mind. This is the love story, not the reaching past her for the cabinet item. But what the reaching past her for the cabinet item is the surface of? The 36 years of accumulated knowledge of each other, accumulated in the body rather than in formal acknowledgement, producing the specific and unremarkable and entirely extraordinary ease of two people who know where each other is going to be. The show knew this was the love story, and it kept putting it in the margins, in the kitchen scenes, in the Tuesday evenings, in the moments after the dramatic resolutions, when the crisis has passed and the family is intact, and Homer and Marge are in the same space doing nothing in particular, being easy with each other, being the couple that is always going to be together, because being together has become as fundamental and as unremarkable and as entirely necessary as the kitchen itself. Let that ease be in the room with you tonight. Let the kitchen be warm. Let the people in it know where each other is going to be. Section 10. The final scene that plays every week that you never really watched. Every episode of The Simpsons ends the same way. Not in the sense that the conclusions are identical 36 seasons of different conclusions, the range of which is one of the more remarkable records of structural creativity in long-form episodic television, make that immediately and obviously untrue. The conclusions vary widely. The show has found dozens of distinct ways to bring an episode to its end: the sentimental ending, the subversive ending, the deliberately flat ending, the surprisingly beautiful ending, the ending that is quietly devastating if you were paying attention, and entirely comfortable if you were not. The conclusions are not the same. But what they are conclusions to the foundational structural fact that every episode resolves toward, regardless of what form the resolution takes, is the same. What every episode ends with, or ends adjacent to, or ends in the gravitational field of, is this: the family is intact. The family is together. The people of 742 Evergreen Terrace are in their positions. The house is the house. The street is the street. The town is the town. This is the show's most deliberate act. Not its most theatrical, or its most quotable, or its most likely to produce the scene that gets extracted and passed around. It is the most deliberate, the act that is renewed at the end of every episode by every writer who has ever written a Simpsons ending. The act that says, whatever happened in these 22 minutes, whatever territory was explored, and whatever darkness was visited, and whatever the drama cost, the family is intact. The family is here. The family will be here next week and the week after and the week after that, because the family does not end. Think about the weight of this commitment, renewed across 800 episodes and 36 years. The weight of the decision, made in the architecture of the show before any specific episode begins, that the ending place is always the family. Always the house on Evergreen Terrace. Always the specific and particular and entirely irreplaceable arrangement of these 5 people in these rooms. The shows that ran alongside The Simpsons in its early seasons, and the shows that have run alongside it in every season since, have mostly not made this commitment. Television has generally accepted that families change, that the people who were together at the beginning will not necessarily be together at the end, that the series finale is a legitimate opportunity to honor the full complexity of what the show has been building by allowing things to resolve in the direction of genuine consequence rather than comfortable restoration. Television has generally honored the reality that things end, that people leave, that families fracture and reconstitute and sometimes do not reconstitute. The Simpsons made a different commitment. It made the commitment that is, in some ways, against the evidence of how lives and families actually work. That is in tension with the show's own ongoing and completely serious engagement with the costs and the difficulties of the specific family. It is depicting the commitment that this family is not going to end, that whatever the episode does with these people, wherever it takes them, however far from the baseline it travels and however close to the edge it brings, the marriage or the parent-child relationships or the structure of the household at the end, the family is intact. This is not sentimentality. Or it is sentimentality in the specific and defensible sense of the word, that means the affirmation of something that is genuinely worth affirming. The show is too honest about the costs and the difficulties and the ongoing friction of this family's life to be sentimental in the sense of denying those things. It does not deny them. It acknowledges them, examines them, stays with them in the episodes that are built around them. And then it ends with the family intact anyway, because the family being intact is the thing that makes all the acknowledging and examining and staying with worth doing. Let your breathing be very low now. Let the depth of the evening be what it is past the middle of the night where things get very quiet, or wherever you are in your own version of late, in the particular quality of the dark that belongs to the specific hour you are in. The title sequence. The opening credits. The image that begins every single episode of The Simpsons, that you have watched so many times it has become part of the visual texture of your relationship with the show. The cloud formation over Springfield, the camera descending through the title letters, the children running out of school as the bell rings, the sequence of vignettes that show the family members moving through their day, converging from their separate directions toward the couch. The couch gag changes. This is one of the show's most beloved traditions and one of its most formally interesting decisions, the decision to reserve a portion of the opening for a variation that is allowed to be anything. The couch gag is a laboratory. It is the show's official permission slip for formal experimentation within the established frame, the space where the rules of the usual show are suspended enough to permit the unusual. The couch gag has been a film noir, a stop-motion animation, an homage to another show's title sequence, a piece of digital art, an extended narrative in its own right. The couch gag has been high art and low comedy and every register between. The couch gag has surprised people who have been watching the show for decades and thought they knew what the couch gag was going to do. And then the family lands on the couch. Always. Whatever the gag did, however far it traveled, however abstract or extended or unexpected its journey, the family lands on the couch. Together. In the arrangement of the family. In front of the television that is always on. This is the show making its opening statement before the episode makes its statement. The opening statement is, they come back. Whatever happens, they come back. The couch is where they come back to. The family is what they come back as. And the ending makes the same statement. After whatever the episode contained, the family is here. The closing image not always literally the couch, but always spiritually the couch. Always the family in the arrangement of the family. Always the specific and particular and utterly reliable, domestic reality of these people in this house. The closing image says, they came back. They always come back. They are here now. There is something about this that goes beyond the television show. You know this if you have watched it long enough. If it has been part of your life across enough years that its episodes have accumulated into a relationship rather than a catalog. If you watched it as a child and found it funny in the surface way and did not know there was any other way to find it. If you watched it as an adolescent and found the darker currents and found them validating in the way that dark things are validating when you are at the age when darkness seems more honest than warmth. If you watch it now, at whatever age you are, and find that you can hold the comedy and the grief and the warmth and the critique and the love simultaneously without needing to choose between them. The show has been there across your different selves. This is the thing that long-running shows with staying power do. They accumulate across the life of their audience in the way that the audience accumulates across the show's run. You bring different selves to the same episodes and the episodes respond differently to the different selves. The Homer that was funny because he was stupid becomes the Homer that is complicated because the stupidity has a cause and the cause is not his fault, and the fog is both the problem and the solution, and the crayon is in there, and the letter is in Lisa's room. The Marge that was the straight woman becomes the Marge who hums the specific sound of the maintenance of a life she chose and keeps choosing. The marriage that was the stable backdrop becomes the love story that should not have worked and keeps working, because the people in it have decided it's going to keep working every day in the daily unremarkable heroism of the choice renewed. The Simpsons has been doing this for 36 years, making the same statement 800 times in 800 different forms. The family is here. The family is always here. The family endures. Not because endurance is easy. The show has spent 36 years demonstrating that endurance is not easy. It has spent 36 seasons showing you the specific ways it is hard, the specific costs it extracts, the specific places where the structure shows its cracks, and where the people show their limitations, and where the town around the family shows its compromised and contaminated and collectively amnesiac reality. But the family endures, past all of it, through all of it, with all of it in the texture of the family rather than behind it, because the cracks and the costs and the limitations and the fog and the crayon and the hum in the kitchen and the saxophone in the upstairs room and the watching eyes in the high chair are not obstacles to the family's reality. They are its reality. They are what the family is made of. Homer, the specific and particular Homer. Fog and all. Marge, the specific and particular Marge. Hum and deliberateness and hidden grief and daily choosing. Bart, still in the 4th grade, still tilting the chair against the wall outside Skinner's office, still performing himself at the dinner table and fully himself in the margins. Lisa, playing the scale toward the reception she has proven is possible, carrying the full picture in the saxophone's notes. Maggie, watching, cataloging, waiting for the moment she has decided will be the right moment, with all the patience and all the intelligence and all the accumulated 36 years of dinner table observations in the silence behind the pacifier. These 5 people, this house, this street, this impossible, contaminated, geographically incoherent, collectively amnesiac, amber-lit town, this show, it is on. Right now, somewhere, The Simpsons is on. In whatever year you are watching this, in whatever version of the world the floating timeline has produced, in whatever configuration of the streaming service or the antenna or the cable box or the device in your hand, The Simpsons is playing. The family is on the couch or at the dinner table or in the kitchen or scattered through the house the way they are scattered through the house when the evening has them and no plot has them. Homer is Homer. Marge is humming. The scale is either playing or recently played or about to play, and the silence of its recent absence is still in the hallway, and the dinner is either on the table or in its future, and Maggie's eyes are open or she is asleep, and even asleep she is paying attention in the way that she pays attention when she is asleep, which is not the same as most people sleeping. The show is on, and you are here, in whatever room, at whatever hour, in whatever version of yourself you brought to this particular evening, you are here. With the show, with the family, with the specific and accumulated weight of everything the show has been saying for 36 years in the voice underneath the jokes, in the language beneath the comedy, in the space between the scenes where the writers who knew too much put the things they could not help putting there. You are the audience that the saxophone was playing toward. You are the receiver the signal was looking for. You are the person in the hallway who stopped. The show knew you would be here. The writers who knew too much were writing for you, not for you specifically, not with any knowledge of the specific room you are in or the specific version of yourself you are tonight, but for the person who is going to be paying this kind of attention, the person who is going to slow down enough to notice the margin, the person who was going to hear the hum and know it was not contentment, the person who was going to see Homer's face in the moment before the word arrived and understand what was in the face. They wrote for you, and here you are. The family is on the couch, the television is on, the evening has gone as far as evenings go. The streets of Springfield are quiet in the specific amber way they are always quiet, and the cooling towers are on the horizon doing whatever they do at this hour, and the fish in the river downstream have however many eyes the fish in that river have, and Ned is inside with his sons and his faith and his daily practice of the chosen self, and Moe's bar is dark now, or almost dark. The last of the regulars having finally headed home, the counter wiped down in the pragmatic way it is always wiped down, the glasses stacked, the door locked, and at 742 Evergreen Terrace, the lights are going out one by one, the way they do when a house is settling toward night. Homer first, Homer goes to sleep the way he does everything, completely and immediately. The transition from awake to asleep without an observable middle stage, the fog simply closing over him and taking him the rest of the way into the dark. Marge second, after the last check of the house, the last verification that the doors are locked, and the children are in their rooms, and the stove is off, and the household is in the arrangement it needs to be safely left for the night. Lisa sometime after, the saxophone long silent, the internal thread still running somewhere beneath the sleep, still reaching, still practicing, still playing toward the reception that she knows is possible because it has happened once and will happen again. Bart eventually, with the specific and characteristic resistance of someone for whom sleep is a capitulation that the day should not require and that the body insists on anyway. And Maggie, in the dark of her room, enormous eyes open or closed, it is hard to say. With Maggie, whether the eyes being closed is the same as not watching. The house is dark. Springfield is quiet. And tomorrow, the sprinklers will come on in Ned Flanders' yard, and the school bell will ring at Springfield Elementary, and the break room at the nuclear plant will have donuts, and Homer will eat them, and Marge will make dinner, and Lisa will play scales, and Bart will tilt the chair against the wall, and Maggie will watch, and Moe will open the bar, and the town will proceed, as the town always proceeds, in the clean version of the world, over the tiles that cover the difficult foundations, with the consistency and the confidence of a town that has been doing this for a very long time and has gotten very good at making it look easy. It is not easy. The show has spent 36 years saying so. But the family is here, it is always here, and when the show comes back on, In whatever format and on whatever device and at whatever hour of whatever version of the world you find yourself in, they will be on the couch, and the credits will roll, and the scale will be playing somewhere upstairs, and the town will be exactly as you left it. It always is. That is the whole point. Sleep now, if sleep is where you are going. The show will be here when you come back. The family will be on the couch. Homer will have a beer. The sprinklers in Ned Flanders' yard will be doing their patient sweep. The saxophone scale will be drifting down the hallway, practicing, always practicing toward the reception it knows is possible. Springfield is waiting for you. It always waits. It is the town that does not end, on the street that does not change, in the house that does not move, in the show that will not let go, not because it cannot, but because neither can we. Good night. End of full script. Section 11. The episode where Homer met God, and God was not surprised to see him. There is a Season 4 episode of The Simpsons called Homer the Heretic. It is not the most famous episode the show ever produced, though it is well regarded and consistently appears in the lists that fans make when they are thinking about the best of the best. It is not the most complex or the most formally ambitious. It is not the one most people would cite as their introduction to the show's deeper currents. But it is, in a specific and important way that the show's larger reputation tends to obscure, the episode that most clearly states what the show believes. Not about religion, though it has things to say about religion that are more nuanced and more generous than they first appear. About Homer. About the specific question of what Homer Simpson is in the moral universe of the story, and what his relationship with the divine operating within the show's own internal logic actually is. The premise is straightforward in the way that the best Simpsons premises are straightforward. Homer decides to stop going to church. He sleeps in on Sunday morning, which turns out to be one of the best mornings he has ever experienced, and the pleasure of the sleep-in and the private domestic mourning gives him the idea that maybe the organized religious practice he has been dutifully attending his whole life is not actually necessary for him to have a functional, spiritual life. Maybe, he reasons, in the specific and not unreasonable logic of Homer's mind, he can have his own relationship with God without the intermediary of the First Church of Springfield and Reverend Lovejoy's sermons. And then, in the specific way that The Simpsons handles the theological, which is to say directly and without irony, and with a complete refusal to wink at the audience about how absurd it is God shows up, not a metaphor for God, not a dream sequence or a fever vision or a symbol requiring interpretation. God shows up in Homer's dream and has a conversation with him. The conversation is warm. It is, in fact, one of the warmer divine-human interactions in American popular culture, which tends to depict God either as terrifying or as absent. This God is neither. This God is interested in Homer. This God takes Homer seriously as an interlocutor, engages with his reasoning, acknowledges the points where Homer's position has merit, and makes his own points with the kind of friendly authority of someone who is used to having important conversations, and who is not threatened by the fact that the person across from him is not intellectually equipped to fully understand all sides of the discussion. The conversation includes something that, if you are watching with the right quality of attention, stops you. God tells Homer that he will one day learn the meaning of life, that this is guaranteed, that the knowledge is coming. But God also says, not yet. Homer's time for that knowledge has not arrived. 6 months later, a vending machine falls on Homer and he goes into a coma. The episode in which Homer meets God in the dream and the episode in which Homer goes into the coma are separated by 6 months of broadcast time. The coma episode aired in April of 1993. Homer the Heretic aired in October of 1992. God's message, "Your time is coming," not yet but coming, was delivered 6 months before Homer's conscious experience, per the coma theory, effectively ended. The writers who knew too much were in the room for both of these episodes. Whether or not they intended the connection, whether the writers who wrote the coma episode in the 1992 to 93 season were consciously echoing the theological conversation from the earlier episode in the same season, is, in the end, less interesting than the fact that the connection is there, available to anyone who is watching with the right kind of sustained attention, present in the text, whether or not it was deliberately placed. Legible in the way that the best things in long-running shows are legible, as the product of a creative environment where the same fundamental concerns keep surfacing, where the same questions keep being asked by different writers in different episodes, where the consistency of the show's deeper preoccupations produces, over time, a coherence that exceeds what any individual episode intended. The question the show is asking, in both of these episodes and in every episode that circles the same territory, is what is Homer's relationship to the meaningful? Not in the philosophical sense, not in the sense of whether Homer has grasped any grand unified theory of existence. In the more personal sense, in the sense of, does Homer's life matter? Does the specific and particular and fog-wrapped and crayon-impaired and 55 IQ life of Homer Simpson on Evergreen Terrace have the quality of significance that makes it worth depicting? Week after week, across 36 years? The show's answer, given over and over again in the margins and between the scenes, and in the specific quality of the writing that the writers who knew too much produced when they were thinking about Homer most carefully, is unambiguous. Yes, it matters. It matters specifically and entirely, and without reservation. Not because Homer is great in the epic sense. Homer is not great in the epic sense, and the show has never pretended he is, and the comedy has always been built on the gap between the epic scale and the actual Homer scale. But because Homer is completely and unreservedly himself, because he brings everything he has, the whole 55, the full weight of the fog, the total and unmediated presence that the fog, in taking so much away, also somehow produces to every moment of his life. God was not surprised to see Homer. That is the detail. In the dream, when God appears and the conversation happens, God treats Homer as someone he has been paying attention to, as someone whose specific case is known and considered, as someone whose relationship with the divine is already established, even if Homer himself does not fully understand its nature. This is the show saying, Homer is known, not by Springfield, which has been misunderstanding him for 36 years, with the specific and consistent misunderstanding of a town that measures worth by the instruments it has available, and does not have the instruments that would measure Homer correctly, not by the nuclear plant, which employs him and exploits him and values him for his incompetence, rather than for anything that is actually worth valuing. Not even by himself. Homer's self-knowledge is limited in the specific ways the fog limits self-knowledge, and there is much about himself that Homer cannot access, much that is behind the fog and the crayon and the radiation and the years of accumulated exposure to Springfield's particular form of cognitive impairment. But by something that the show, operating within the theological framework it has constructed for its internal universe, depicts as aware of Homer's full situation, aware of the crayon, aware of the letter, aware of the moment in the dark theater when the intelligence was briefly restored and Homer leaned over and said the right thing and Lisa cried, aware of the moments when, in the fog and despite the fog, Homer turns toward the people he loves with the full weight of everything the 55 allows him to bring, aware that what Homer brings is, in its own way, considerable. The episode ends with Homer back in the church. Not because he was wrong to leave. Exactly, the episode is too honest about religion's complicated relationship with genuine spirituality to make that simple an argument. But because the community, imperfect as it is and as the show has always depicted it, is where Homer belongs. Where the people who love him, imperfectly and with varying degrees of success in demonstrating that love, are. Where his family comes every Sunday. Where Marge brings the specific form of her faith and her community commitment and the specific version of herself that she is in this particular space. Where even Ned, whose relationship with the church is perhaps the most serious and the most fraught and the most complicated in the show's entire cast, is every week. Homer goes back to the church. And God, who has already told him that the meaning is coming, just not yet, is presumably aware of this too. Is presumably aware that Homer, fog and all, is doing his best in the specific and particular and entirely non-epic way that Homer does his best. Is presumably, if the show's internal theology holds, entirely unsurprised. The show does not tell you that Homer's best is good enough. The show is too honest for that easy a reassurance. But it shows you, in episode after episode, in season after season, in the accumulated texture of 36 years of the same family on the same street in the same impossible town, it shows you that Homer's best is real. The best that a 55 IQ man with a crayon in his frontal lobe and decades of radiation exposure and a difficult childhood defined by the absence of a mother who loved him and who was driven away by the billionaire he ended up working for this best, the real and specific and entirely his best, is something considerable, something worth knowing. Section 12. The things Lisa knows that the show never made her say. There is a version of The Simpsons that is easier to make and easier to watch, and that would have, over 36 seasons, accumulated considerably less of what the show has actually accumulated. This version keeps Lisa as the designated voice of reason. It uses her intelligence as a corrective mechanism whenever the show needs someone to articulate the lesson, the moral, the thing the episode has been moving toward. This version sends in Lisa. Lisa walks to the front of the scene and delivers the conclusion, clearly and correctly and in the full force of her vocabulary, and the episode has its resolution, and the audience has its summary, and everyone knows what to think. The show has done versions of this. Lisa does sometimes deliver the conclusion. The episodes where she does are not always wrong to have her do it, and some of them are very good episodes. But the version of the show that uses Lisa only as the lesson deliverer is the lesser version, and the writers who knew too much understood why. They understood because they understood something specific about what it actually means to be the intelligent one in a family. To be the person who sees the full picture when the people around you are operating on partial pictures. To be the one who can articulate the lesson, who has the vocabulary for the conclusion, who can trace the arc of the situation from beginning to end and name it accurately at every stage. The thing it means is this: you are also the person who knows when saying it will not help, when the articulation of the lesson will not produce the learning of the lesson, but will instead produce defensiveness or hurt, or the specific closing down that happens in people who feel corrected rather than reached. When the right thing, the thing that would actually serve the situation and the people in it, is not the accurate statement of the conclusion, but the silence that holds the space for the people in the situation to arrive at. Something themselves, even if the something they arrive at is smaller than the thing you could have delivered fully formed. Lisa knows when to hold the lesson. This is the thing the show does with her that the easier version would not do. It gives her moments scattered and infrequent but entirely deliberate, in which she knows the conclusion and does not say it. In which she holds the full picture in the specific and sometimes painful silence of someone who has assessed the situation and determined that the accurate articulation is not what is needed right now. These moments are not the moments when Lisa is absent or checked out or has missed what is happening. They are the opposite. They are the moments when Lisa is most fully present, most fully in possession of the situation's meaning, and most fully in command of the specific and difficult intelligence that tells you when to speak and when to stay quiet. The show depicts these moments with the specific visual and tonal language that it reserves for Lisa's interior, states the quality of her face in the pause before she chooses not to speak, the specific kind of stillness that is different from Lisa's absence, and that a viewer who has been watching long enough can read as the presence of something held rather than the absence of something to say. You can see her not saying it. You can see the decision being made. You can see, if you are paying the right kind of attention, the full picture she is holding and the calculation she is performing about whether the holding or the saying serves the people she loves. She usually holds it. This is, in the accounting of the things the show does right with Lisa, one of the most important. Because what it says about Lisa, what it says about the specific nature of her intelligence as the show has constructed it, is that intelligence, in its full form, is not only the ability to see clearly, it is also the ability to understand what to do with what you see. The ability to be a full picture person in a partial picture world without the full picture becoming a weapon. The ability to love people imperfectly served by their own vision with the understanding and the patience that their limitations invite, rather than the corrective force that your superior vision could deploy. Lisa knows what she knows, and she knows what to do with what she knows. These are two different and not always coexisting skills, and the show, over 36 seasons, has quietly given her both. There is a specific dinner table scene, and we return to the dinner table, because the dinner table is where so many of the show's quietest observations are deployed, in which Homer says something that is wrong. Not spectacularly wrong, not the kind of wrong that the episode is built around and that will be the source of the plot's central consequence. Just wrong in the small and everyday and entirely characteristic Homer way, an incorrect statement. A misremembered fact, a confident assertion that the confidence is not warranted for. The kind of wrong that the 55 produces reliably, and that the family has been accommodating for years, and Lisa knows he is wrong. She knows it immediately and completely, with the accuracy of her 8-year-old mind that has accumulated an enormous amount of knowledge about an enormous range of subjects, and that processes incoming information against that knowledge automatically, without effort, as a feature of how her mind works. She knows he is wrong, and she does not say so. This is such a small thing. It is so unremarkable in the texture of the dinner table scene that most viewers will not catch it. But the writers put it in. The animators gave Lisa's face the specific expression that belongs to the moment of holding something. And the dinner table continued, and Homer continued in the confidence of being incorrect, and the meal proceeded. And Lisa held it. Why? The episode does not explain. The scene does not annotate its own observation. But if you know Lisa, if you have been watching long enough to know the specific nature of her relationship to the people around her and the specific calculations she makes about when to deploy and when to withhold, you know why. Because Homer is happy. Because he is in the middle of a moment of enjoying the dinner and the company and the specific and simple pleasure of being at the table with his family, and the happiness is real and the pleasure is genuine, and the wrong thing he said is not a wrong thing that is going to cause anyone harm if it remains uncorrected. And correcting it would not give Homer the knowledge that would make him more correct in the future. It would give Homer the knowledge that he was wrong, which would make him feel the specific and recognizable Homer shame that descends on him in the moments when his limitations are made visible, which is the feeling that the fog is supposed to protect him from. Lisa knows this. She knows the cost of the correction. She knows the cost exceeds the value of the accuracy. And she holds the lesson at the dinner table, in the specific and invisible act of love that is the intelligence knowing when not to speak. The show put this in the margins, in the scene nobody talks about, in the expression on Lisa's face in the moment before she decides not to say the thing. This is the full picture person. This is the difficult and beautiful and entirely specific gift of being the one who sees clearly not just the clarity, but the wisdom about what to do with the clarity, not always using it. Sometimes in the specific and considered act of love, holding it. Section 13. Springfield at 3 in the morning. There is a version of Springfield that no episode has ever made the full subject of a story. It exists in the gaps between the stories, in the hours that the show generally skips over the hours after everyone at 742 Evergreen Terrace has gone to sleep and before anyone has woken up. The hours when Springfield is most fully itself, in the specific way that places are most fully themselves when they are not being occupied by the purposes of the people who live in them. Springfield at 3 in the morning. The town is quiet in a way that it is not quiet at any other hour. The day quiet of Springfield is never genuine quiet. It is the pause between activities, the breath between conversations, the momentary stillness of a town that is always in some state of motion. The evening quiet is quieter but still has the residue of the day in it, the warmth of occupied spaces, the ambient presence of people who are still awake in their houses even if they are not making much noise. The 3 in the morning quiet is different. It is the quiet of a town that has, for once, genuinely stopped. Not paused, not reduced, stopped. All the noise-making is suspended. The machinery of Springfield's daily life, which is varied and constant, and includes everything from the low-level hum of the nuclear plant's cooling systems to the specific acoustic signature of Moe's bar during the hour before closing, has been put down for the night. And what is left, in the absence of all the noise, is the town itself. The streets of Evergreen Terrace at 3 in the morning have the quality that streets in residential neighborhoods have in the deepest part of the night, a quality that is not eerie, exactly, though it is close to eerie. It is the quality of familiarity stripped of context. All the familiar things are present, the houses, the trees, the specific lean of the telephone poles, the particular arrangement of mailboxes and driveways that you know as well as your own face, but the context that makes them familiar, the movement and the occupancy and the daily use is gone. What is left is the geometry of the place, the physical structure of it, the shape that the town makes in the dark when nobody is looking. Ned Flanders' yard at 3 in the morning is the most immaculate it will be all day. The sprinklers are off. The grass holds whatever the day's maintenance left it with. The fence between his yard and Homer's yard is just a fence, not a social stage for the daily performance of neighborly interaction, not the site of Homer's particular and ongoing exasperation or Ned's particular and ongoing patient warmth. Just wood and paint and the specific angle it makes against the night sky. At 3 in the morning, the Simpson house is whatever the day did not finish with. The dishes from dinner, if Homer and Marge did not get to them, are in the sink. The television in the living room is off, which is how you know the house is deeply asleep. The television being off is the Simpson household's deepest sleep signal, the confirmation that even Homer's ambient watch anything attention has finally given way to the pull of the unconscious. The saxophone is in its case in Lisa's room. The crayon is in Homer's brain. Maggie is asleep in her crib, and whether her eyes are open or closed in sleep is something the show has never definitively established. And the ambiguity of it, whether Maggie even in sleep is attending to something, watching something in the private dark of her room that the rest of the family cannot see, is part of what makes Maggie the most interesting open question in the show's entire run. The town holds everything that happened today. All of it is there, in the houses and the streets and the nuclear plant's quiet hum on the horizon, in the amber of the single streetlight that is the last thing visible from the upstairs window of the Simpson house in the direction of downtown. The enormous things are there. The ordinary things are there. The things that were forgotten before they were fully acknowledged are there in the texture of the town, which has always been the place where Springfield puts what it is not quite ready to face directly. There is something restoring about 3 in the morning in a town that is very good at returning to normal. The restoration that happens in the deep of the night is not the social restoration, not the collective act of choosing the clean version of the world that happens in the morning with everyone watching. This is a different restoration. This is the world resetting without any human agency, in the specific way that the physical world resets through time, through the passage of the hours that ask nothing and require nothing, and simply accumulate until morning. This restoration does not ask the town to decide anything. It does not require a vote or a collective agreement or the legal decree of Judge Snyder. It just happens. The hours pass. The dark holds the town. And in the morning, the town will be what it always is, not because the town decided to be that, but because the night simply carried it here. This is the gift that 3 in the morning offers. Not the decision to proceed, but the proceeding itself, automatic and unasked for, the world simply continuing to be the world without requiring any performance of continuation. The family in the houses on Evergreen Terrace does not have to choose to be here tomorrow. They will simply be here tomorrow. Because the hours will have passed and the morning will have come, and the sprinklers in Ned Flanders' yard will start their sweep, and the school bell will ring at Springfield Elementary, and the donut table at the nuclear plant will be restocked, and all of it will begin again. It always begins again. The light in the Simpson house at 3 in the morning is the light that comes through windows in deep night, the ambient light of a sky that is darker than black but not completely without light, the light that exists at the very edge of the visible spectrum in the hours when the town is not producing any light of its own. It is the light that Homer's face rests in when he is asleep, the light that falls across Marge's hair where it lies flat against the pillow being the only place in the world where the tower comes down, where the blue monument to the morning collapses into the ordinary fact of hair and sleep and the specific quality of a woman at rest after the day has finished asking things of her. This is the hour that belongs to no one. That asks nothing. That simply holds the town and the family and everything the day contained, gently and without judgment, until the morning comes to reclaim it. Let this be the hour you are in, wherever you are. Let the ambient dark hold you the way the ambient dark holds Springfield at 3 in the morning, without asking anything, without requiring anything, without the performance of continuation that the day will demand when it arrives. Let the hours pass. Let the world simply proceed. Let the morning find you where you are. It will. It always does. Springfield will be here when the light comes back. The family will be on the couch when the credits roll. The scale will be playing in the upstairs room when the evening settles. The town is quiet. The dark holds everything. Sleep. Section 14. What the show knew about us. The Simpsons has been on the air since December of 1989. This means that it has been part of the cultural air supply of the English-speaking world, and through translation and broadcast, considerable portions of the non-English-speaking world for going on 4 decades. It has been there during events and developments and shifts in the cultural landscape that it could not have anticipated when it began. And through all of those events and developments and shifts, it has continued to do the thing it has always done. It has put the same family on the same couch and sent them through 22 minutes of the specific kind of story it tells. And at the end of the 22 minutes, the family has been returned to the baseline, intact, ready for the next episode. This persistence, this specific and remarkable persistence, is one of the things the show has done that no analysis fully accounts for. We can account for the quality of the early seasons, which is real and well documented, and the foundation of the show's cultural position. We can account for the cultural ubiquity, for the way the show's vocabulary and references and images have become embedded in the shared language of people who have grown up in its presence. We can account for the nostalgia that keeps older viewers returning, and the curiosity that keeps bringing in new ones. But the persistence itself, the fact that the show is still on, that there are still new episodes being made and watched, that the family is still on the couch, 36 seasons after they first sat on it, this requires a different kind of accounting. It requires the acknowledgement that the show is providing something that keeps being needed, that its specific form of storytelling is filling a specific and continuing need in the people who watch it. What is the need? This is the question that the show's cultural longevity invites, and it is a question that has been answered in many ways by many people over the years. It is satire that stays relevant because American culture keeps providing the targets. It is animation that escapes the limitations of live action. It is character work of sufficient depth that the characters remain interesting across decades. It is the couch gag and the celebrity cameos and the pop culture references and all the other things that the show has used to stay current even as the world changes around it. All of these answers are correct. None of them is the full answer. The full answer is something that the writers who knew too much were pointing toward across hundreds of episodes, in the space between the scenes and in the margins of the stories, and in the moments that nobody talks about but that stay. The full answer is this: the show knows about us. Not about American culture in the aggregate, not about the satirical targets, not about the political and social and economic conditions that make The Simpsons' particular brand of critique continuously relevant, about us specifically, about the specific and irreducible experience of being a person in a family, in a house, on a street, in a town that asks more of you than you have on most days, and less of you than you could give on the good days. About the specific experience of loving people imperfectly and being loved imperfectly and building a life in that specific and imperfect loving and finding that it holds. The show knows that most lives are not epic, that most days are ordinary and most dinners are adequate, and most of what constitutes a life is the unremarkable accumulation of Tuesday evenings, each one very like the last, each one entirely specific and entirely itself. Each one a version of the same ongoing act of being here, together, in the house, getting through it. The show knows that the unremarkable is where the real life lives, that the dramatic scenes, the crises and the revelations and the speeches and the episodes built around a conflict that needs to be resolved are important and are real and do carry genuine weight, but that they are not the primary substance of the life. They are the interruptions. The primary substance is the dinner table and the couch and the hum in the kitchen and the scale from the upstairs room and Homer's face in the moment before the word arrives. The show knows that the family is the most important thing and that the most important thing is rarely treated as such by the people who have it, because the people who have it are inside it, in the specific way that you cannot see the full shape of something you are inside of. That you go to the dinner table every night and you are there and you are present to varying degrees and you eat what is in front of you and you have whatever version of the conversation the evening produces and you go about whatever comes. Next, and the accumulation of all of this, the 36 years of dinner tables, the 10,000 Tuesday evenings, the daily and unremarkable and entirely irreplaceable fact of being in this specific family, in this specific house, is the thing. The actual and irreducible thing. The thing you will, eventually, and in the retrospective clarity of the sufficient distance, understand to have been the main event. The show knows this. and it has been saying so patiently and persistently, and in the language of the 22-minute episode with the intact ending, for 36 years. That is what the writers who knew too much knew. Not the secrets of Springfield, not the hidden lore, not the theories about radiation and comas and the unsolved shooting and the immortal billionaire, though all of that is there too, and it is genuinely interesting, and it rewards the attention you bring to it. What they knew, at the level that mattered most, was this: the family on the couch, the house on the street, the ordinary evening. The people who are imperfectly themselves and who love each other imperfectly, and who keep showing up to the dinner table and the couch and the kitchen and the hallway where the scale drifts down from upstairs, they knew that this was worth 36 years of telling, that it would keep being worth it for as long as there were people who needed to be told, that the need would not run out, because the need is as old as people are, as permanent as the fact of being in a family and loving them and not quite understanding them and being in a house together on a Tuesday evening and doing your best with what the evening provides. The show knew about us, and here we are. The family is on the couch. The evening holds the house. The town is quiet in the amber of its streetlights. The scale has played its last note for tonight. The hum is silent, the kitchen dark, the table cleared. Everything is as it should be. You are here. The show knew you would be here. The writers who knew too much were writing toward this moment. This specific and unrepeatable configuration of you, in whatever room you are in, at whatever hour this is, listening to the specific and particular story of a family that is not your family and somehow always has been. They were writing toward the moment when the day releases you. When the weight finds its way down and the room gets warmer, and the distance between you and everything difficult becomes the right distance, far enough to be survivable, close enough to be real, they were writing toward sleep. And here you are. Good night. Springfield will be here in the morning. It always is. End of complete script. Section 15. The small moments that lasted longer than the big ones. There is a type of memory that does not operate the way the brain's filing system would prefer. The brain, left to its own organizational instincts, would sort experiences by importance, would keep the large events in the accessible, front-of-mind filing, and let the small ones recede into the compressed archives at the back, where they wait in rough and undifferentiated form to be retrieved if ever a direct search is conducted for them. The brain's system would prioritize the notable over the ordinary, the dramatic over the mundane, the events that generated strong emotion over the ones that generated none. The brain system does not always follow the brain's preferences. Memories surface according to their own logic, which is not the logic of importance but the logic of sensory attachment. The smell that carries the whole day with it, the specific quality of light at a specific hour, the sound that was in the background of a moment that was not, by any reasonable measure, a significant moment, and that surfaces 30 years later in the specific way that sound carries the whole moment with it, intact and complete and more vivid than most of what was classified as important at the time. The small moments last longer than the big ones. The specific and unremarkable and entirely present small moments, the ones that were not trying to be memorable, that had no agenda and no performance and no awareness of themselves as things that would be remembered, these are the ones that stay. Not always, not reliably, but disproportionately often. The Simpsons, the writers who knew too much, understood this about how memory works and about what television is for. Not always the show has produced its share of scenes designed to be memorable, staged for impact, calibrated for the emotional response of an audience who will carry this moment with them when the episode ends. Those scenes work when they work and are important. But the scenes that stay the longest, that surface in the specific and involuntary way that the small moment memories surface those scenes, are the other kind. The ones that were not trying to be memorable, the ones in the margin. There is a moment in a season that is not particularly remembered as one of the show's best, a middle season, a season from the period when the show was past its golden peak and was finding its way through the terrain of longevity, when the writing was variable and the episodes ranged widely from genuinely excellent to merely competent, in which Homer and Bart are in the kitchen together, not in the context of a significant scene, not positioned by the episode's plot to be doing something that matters to the episode's resolution. They are in the kitchen at the same time, because the kitchen is where people end up when they are hungry between meals, and both of them are hungry between meals with the specific and characteristic hunger of people who were not designed to be hungry, and who respond to hunger with the immediacy that Homer and Bart respond to most things. They are making a sandwich. Or Homer is making a sandwich and Bart is involved in the vicinity of the sandwich. And there is a moment brief, unmarked, not accompanied by a musical cue or a camera move, that signals significance in which Homer shows Bart something about the sandwich. Not a lesson about sandwiches. Not the structured transmission of knowledge from parent to child. Something smaller than that. A specific detail about the way to do the thing, the way Homer has always done it, the specific small habit that is entirely Homer's and that has no claim to being the correct or the recommended way, but that is his way, the way that comes from whatever combination of impulse and long practice has produced the specific way Homer makes a sandwich, and Bart watches. He watches with the attention, not the full attention, not the formal attention of someone who has been told to pay attention, but the ambient attention of someone who is in the vicinity of something being done and who finds, without quite intending to, that they are watching how it is done. The attention of a child absorbing, without awareness of the absorbing, the specific and personal and unrepeatable habits of a parent. The watching that produces the things that children carry forward into their own adult lives without knowing where they came from. The habits that surface decades later as things that are simply how they do things, with no memory attached of the moment when the doing was first observed. The episode continues. The sandwich is made, the moment passes, but the writers put it in. They staged the scene in the kitchen between episodes' more significant scenes. They gave Bart the ambient watching. They gave Homer the specific and personal way he does the thing. And in doing so, they captured something that the dramatic scenes, for all their power, cannot capture. The ongoing and invisible transmission that happens in families, not through the lessons that are intended to be lessons, but through the daily proximity of people who live together and absorb each other's specific and personal and entirely unrepeatable ways of doing things. This is how families transmit themselves, not through the formal occasions, not through the conversations designed to impart something, through the kitchen at odd hours, through the ambient watching, through the specific small habits that pass from person to person without ceremony or intention, lodging somewhere in the body of the watcher, waiting to surface years later in the adult who makes a sandwich in a specific and personal way and has no idea where the specific and personal way came from. Homer is in Bart, not in the ways that are dramatic or the ways that the show tends to make the subject of episodes, in the ways that are invisible, in the specific and personal sandwich-making way that is entirely Homer's and that will, without either of them knowing it, become Bart's. The show knew this. The writers put it in the margin. In the kitchen scene between the episode's significant scenes, in the moment that was not trying to be remembered, it is remembered. In the specific and involuntary way that the small moment memories surface not because you were looking for it, but because the sensory texture of a similar moment brings it back, intact and vivid and more present than most of the classified as important memories. This is the thing the show has been doing for 36 years, putting the small moments in the margins, trusting that the small moments are where the real transmission happens, trusting that the kitchen at odd hours and the ambient watching and the specific personal habit passing without ceremony from parent to child is the actual story, the one that lasts beyond the episode and beyond the season and beyond the years. The family makes the sandwich. The kitchen is the kitchen. The evening moves through its stages. And somewhere in Bart, without his awareness, Homer is being filed in the category of the permanent. Section 16. The voice of Homer Simpson and the 22 minutes that changed everything. Before there were theories. Before there were analyses of the radiation and the coma and the shooting and the immortal billionaire. Before the internet accumulated the weight of 36 years of observation and fan engagement and the specific kind of sustained attention that the show rewards so richly. Before all of that, there was a voice. Dan Castellaneta has been the voice of Homer Simpson since the beginning. This is a fact so thoroughly part of the show's existence that it has become invisible in the way that the most essential things become invisible, absorbed into the background of what the show is, present in every episode without being a subject of conscious attention. The voice is Homer. Homer is the voice. The two cannot be separated in the specific and complete way that the most successful voice performances cannot be separated from the characters they create. But here is the thing about the voice that requires a particular kind of listening to fully appreciate. The voice of Homer Simpson is not a single voice. It is a range. A spectrum of sound that extends from the full comedy register at one end, the broad, comedic, character signaling register that announces Homer's presence as a source of humor, to something else entirely at the other end. Something quieter. Something that is not signaling at all, that is not performing any function except the specific function of being the sound of Homer Simpson when Homer Simpson is not performing himself. The comedy register is what most people hear when they hear Homer's voice. The specific quality of sound that makes Homer's voice recognizable from the first syllable, that is part of what the show has been since the first episode. This register is Homer, the character Homer, as comedic type. Homer as the avatar of a specific kind of American man. Homer as the delivery system for the jokes. But there are moments in the show scattered across seasons, unreliable in their frequency but consistent in their quality, when the voice drops into the other register. When the performance of Homer gives way to something that sounds like the man inside the character, when the warmth and the imprecision and the specific emotional availability that is Homer's most real and most private quality is in the voice without the comedy packaging around it. These moments tend to be the moments with Lisa, or the moments with Bart, in the specific register of the parent-child relationship, when the Bart who is performing Bart and the Homer who is performing Homer briefly stop performing and are simply in the room together, and the voice carries that. Or the moments with Marge, in the late-night kitchen version of their relationship, when the day has finally finished and the house is quiet, and whatever Homer needs to say to Marge at this hour is said in the voice that is not the character's voice, but the man's. The writers who knew too much wrote toward those moments. They wrote the lines that the other register required. The lines that could only be said in the quieter voice, not because they were dramatically structured to require it, but because they were true enough that the truth pulled the voice out of the comedy register and into something closer to the source. The lines that arrived from somewhere real rather than somewhere written. The lines that, when the voice actor delivered them, produced in the voice the quality of the actual thing rather than the performance of the thing. The show has always been careful about when to go there. The quieter register is used sparingly, because its power depends on its rarity. If Homer were always in that register, the comedy of the character would collapse, and the character would become something different. The comedy must be the default so that the departures from the comedy can carry what they carry. The character must be primarily the character so that the moments of the man behind the character can have the weight they have. But the moments are there. They have always been there. And if you have been watching long enough to know the difference between the two registers, if your ear has been trained through 36 seasons of hearing the voice, to catch the specific and subtle shift from one to the other, then when the shift happens, when the voice drops into the register that is not performing anything, you know it. You feel it in the specific way that the involuntary response to genuine emotional truth feels, not as a reaction to something performed, but as a recognition of something real. The voice is the show's most direct line to what it knows. Beneath the animation and the writing and the structure of the 22-minute episode, beneath the satire and the comedy and the theories and the mysteries and the 36 seasons of the floating timeline, beneath all of it, the voice of Homer Simpson, in the register that is not the character but the man, saying the thing that is not the joke but the truth. This is what the writers who knew too much were writing toward. This is what they put in the margins, in the lines that required the other register to deliver. In the conversations that happen after the episode's plot has finished its business, in the kitchen at 3 a.m, in the hallway where the scale has just stopped playing, in the space between the things that happen in Springfield and the thing that the show has always been, the voice drops. The man says the thing, and you feel it. Section 17. Good night, Springfield. The night is very deep now. Wherever you are, whatever room holds you, whatever city or town or rural stretch of road the room is in, whatever latitude and longitude your particular version of tonight occupies, the night has done its work. The day has released its hold. The things that were urgent in the morning have found their way to the appropriate distance, which is the distance at which they remain real but do not require immediate response. The body has found its way to whatever arrangement it has decided on for the hours ahead. The mind has slowed to the pace of the night, which is the pace of something that is not going anywhere in particular and is not required to. Springfield is settling too. The town does this every night. In the gap between the latest episode and whatever comes next, it settles into the version of itself that exists when nobody is watching. The version that does not need to be a comedy or a satire or a vessel for theories about radiation and institutional corruption and the specific nature of a consciousness that has been in a coma since 1993? The version that is simply a town. Houses on streets, a river with fish in it, a nuclear plant on the skyline, its cooling towers doing whatever they do in the night hours when Homer is not at his station and the facility is running on its own minimum viable programming. A bar? Dark now. A school? Dark now. A church where Ned Flanders' faith keeps its vigil in whatever form faith keeps its vigil in the hours when the faithful are asleep. And at 742 Evergreen Terrace, the house that is the center of the show's universe, and that has been that center for 36 years without losing any of its specific and irreplaceable quality as the place where this family lives. The house is at rest. The windows are dark or nearly dark. The rooms hold the warmth of the day's occupation, the specific accumulated warmth of 5 people who have been in this house through the hours since morning and have left in the walls and the air the residue of themselves. Homer is asleep in the specific and complete way that Homer sleeps total absence, the fog extending all the way down into whatever the sleep is, carrying him somewhere that the show does not follow and that the theories do not account for, somewhere that is Homer's own and that belongs to none of the competing frameworks that the show's considerable analytical community has applied to him. Just sleep. Just Homer, absent from the day and its demands, present in whatever the night provides. Marge is asleep with the blue tower of hair released. This is the nightly private version of Marge, the version that nobody in Springfield sees, the version that belongs only to the room, and to Homer's sleeping proximity, and to whatever Marge is. In the hours when she is not humming and not managing and not making the dinner and not doing any of the things that the show depicts, her doing, just Marge, just the woman who chose this life, and chose it again today, and who will choose it again tomorrow, now in the brief suspension of the choosing, at rest in the life she chose. Bart is asleep in whatever arrangement Bart sleeps in, which is probably not the arrangement that the pillow and the blanket were designed to facilitate Bart's relationship with designed arrangements being, historically, adversarial. He is asleep in the specific way of children who resist sleep and then fall into it completely, the resistance simply ceasing at some point and the sleep arriving without transition. In sleep, the performing stops. The monitoring of the room's social terrain stops. The calculation of where the line is and how close to approach it stops. What is left is Bart without the performance of Bart, which is also, in the specific and important way that children are most themselves in sleep, completely and fully Bart, the original Bart, the one before the performance was developed as a strategy. Lisa is asleep with the saxophone in its case, and the internal thread still running somewhere, because Lisa's internal thread does not fully stop in sleep, but has found its nighttime pace, which is slower and more associative and less driven than the daytime pace. The things she is thinking in sleep are not the things she thinks in the day. They are softer versions, more image than argument, more feeling than analysis. The saxophone appears in them sometimes, playing phrases that she has not yet worked out while awake, and that the sleeping mind approaches from different angles than the waking mind uses. She will wake up tomorrow and something will have shifted slightly in the way she hears a particular passage, and she will not know why, and it will be because of this. And Maggie is in her crib in the dark of her room, enormous eyes open or closed, watching something in the private dark that the rest of the family cannot see, in the silence that is her strategy and her armor and her deepest self, holding in the specific and patient and entirely deliberate silence of Maggie Simpson 36 years of observation about the family she is in and the world the family inhabits and what she intends to do about it. When the moment she has chosen arrives, the house is quiet, the street is quiet, the town is quiet in the specific amber dark of 3 a.m. on a street in Springfield, which is every street and no street, which is the town you grew up in wherever you grew up, which is the center of the show's universe and therefore, for 36 years and counting, a small and permanent and entirely impossible part of the center of yours. You have been here before. You will be here again. The show will be on, in some form, in some format, in some version of the world that the floating timeline has not yet produced, and the family will be on the couch, and the credits will roll, and the title sequence will begin, and the couch gag will do whatever it does, and the family will land, and the episode will be whatever it is, and the 22 minutes will pass, and at the end, the family will be intact. They are always intact. Let that be the last thing the evening offers you. Not the theories, not the mysteries, not the questions the show has never fully answered. The intact family. The house on the street. The warmth in the walls. The hum that has gone quiet for the night. The scale that will start again in the morning. Homer, asleep. Marge, at rest. Bart, finally still. Lisa, following the thread into the gentler country of sleep. Maggie, watching. Everything as it should be. Everything always as it should be. The show will be here when you come back. It always is. Good night. End of complete script. Fall asleep to The Simpsons. Moments that were clearly written by someone who knew too much. Sections contained. 1. The crayon in Homer's brain. 2. The town that keeps forgetting on purpose. 3. Marge's hidden grief and the language she never learned to speak. 4. Bart's report cards and the system that was never meant to save him. 5. Lisa's saxophone and the sound of someone talking to themselves. 6. The treehouse of horror episodes that weren't horror at all. 7. The dinner table scenes nobody talks about. 8. Springfield's background characters who know too much. 9. The love story between Homer and Marge that should have ended. 10. The final scene that plays every week that you never really watched. 11. The episode where Homer met God. And God was not surprised to see him. 12. The things Lisa knows that the show never made her say. 13. Springfield at 3 in the morning. 14. What the show knew about us. 15. The small moments that lasted longer than the big ones. 16. The voice of Homer Simpson and the 22 minutes that changed everything. 17. Good night, Springfield. Section 18. Every Sunday night since 1989. There is a specific quality to the Sunday evening that people who grew up watching The Simpsons carry in their bodies. Not everyone, and not always. And it varies by generation and by how the show was delivered to you, whether it was the appointment television of its early years, the event of Sunday at 8 that shaped the rhythm of the week's end for households across the country, or whether you came to it later, in the streaming era, in the era of having the whole catalog available at any time, which is a different relationship and not a lesser one, but is different in this specific way. The show was designed for Sunday. It was made for the particular quality of Sunday evening, for what Sunday evening does to people and to families, and to the specific kind of attention that the end of the week and the approach of the next one produces. Sunday evening is its own country. It has a specific emotional climate that is not shared by any other evening of the week. That is the product of a specific convergence of temporal facts. The weekend is ending, the week is approaching. The particular freedom of Saturday has already been spent. The particular dread or anticipation of Monday has not yet fully arrived, but is making itself felt in the ambient atmosphere of the evening. Sunday is the evening of the held breath. The evening of the still point between what was and what is coming. The evening of being exactly where you are, in exactly this week, at exactly this stage of whatever your life currently is. The Simpsons was built for this. Not consciously, not with any theoretical framework about the psychology of television viewing by day of week, but by the deep instinct of writers and producers who were making a show about a family that is perpetually at the still point, perpetually between the week that just happened and the week that is coming, perpetually in the held breath of the Sunday evening of a life that is never quite as ordered or as meaningful or as resolved as the people living it might wish. But that is theirs, entirely and irrevocably theirs, and that keeps going. Homer on the couch on Sunday evening is the show saying, this is the still point. This is the moment between. This is the evening that belongs to the family rather than to the week's demands. The hour when the house is allowed to be simply the house and the people are allowed to be simply themselves, without the performance of productivity or the performance of responsibility or the performance of any of the other selves the week requires. This is the couch. This is the beer. This is the television and the specific quality of the television at this hour, which is the quality of something that asks nothing of you except that you be here, present, in receipt of whatever it is offering. The show offered itself every Sunday for years, and then kept offering itself in whatever format the years produced, and the specific quality of the offer has not changed across the formats. The offer is always the same. Here is a family. Here are 22 minutes. Here is the couch and the beer and the television. Here is Homer, who is entirely himself. Here is Marge, who is maintaining. Here is Bart, who is performing and behind the performance being fully himself. Here is Lisa, playing toward the reception she knows is possible. Here is Maggie, watching. Come in, sit down, let the week be somewhere else for 22 minutes. That is the offer. Every Sunday for 36 years? That is what the show knew how to do and kept doing, season after season, through all the variation in quality and tone and the debates about whether it was still the show it had been in the seasons that everyone agreed were the best. Through all of that, the offer remained the same. Come in, sit down, the family is here. And the people came, generation after generation. Some of them the same people who had been coming since 1989, and some of them finding the show for the first time in whatever year they found it, but all of them coming for the same reason that has always been the reason, the offer. The specific and simple and entirely reliable offer of the couch and the family and the 22 minutes and the intact ending. The offer was never about the theories. The theories are what you find when you look closely enough and long enough at something you love. The hidden structure, the patterns beneath the surface, the things that were put in by the people who knew too much and that reward the attention that the surface does not require but the depths do. The theories are real. The things they identify in the show are real. The radiation and the coma and the mysterious shooter and the immortal billionaire and the Armin Tamzarian question and all the rest of it, these are things the show actually contains, actually rewards you for finding, actually becomes richer for your awareness of. But the offer is simpler than the theories. The offer precedes the theories. The offer is what brought you close enough to the show to find the theories in the first place. The offer is, come home. The show is home. The Simpson house on Evergreen Terrace, in the town that is every town and no town, in the show that has been on since 1989 and is still on and will be on past the moment you are reading this, is home in the specific and non-literal sense that certain stories and certain characters and certain imaginative spaces become home to the people who find them at the right age, in the right way. It is home because it has been there. Because it was there when you were 8, if you were 8 in the early 90s, and it was there when you were 18, and it was there when things were difficult, and when things were ordinary, and when things were the specific and chronic difficulty that ordinary hides, and it will be there in whatever comes next. The show is home the way that home is home, not because it is always comfortable, not because it always says what you need to hear in the way you need to hear it, not because it never disappoints or never goes somewhere you did not expect, or never produces a season that you watch with the specific and recognizable feeling of a place you love not quite being itself, but because it is the place you return to, because the specific weight and warmth of it, accumulated across years of returning, is in your body in the way that home is in the body, not as information but as orientation, as the thing your compass is calibrated to, as the direction that feels like the right direction when you are lost. This is what 36 years of the same family on the same couch produces in the people who have been watching. Not a set of facts about the show, not a catalog of favorite episodes or memorable quotes or theories about what is really going on in Springfield. Those things are there too, and they are valuable. But underneath them, in the place that is older than analysis and quieter than knowledge, is the compass, the orientation, the weight and warmth of something you have come home to enough times that coming home to it has become part of how you know where you are. The show knows this. It has always known this. The writers who knew too much knew this from the beginning, and the writers who have come after them have known it, and the people who produce the show in whatever season it is currently in know it. The offer is the thing. The offer is why the show has to have the intact ending every episode, because the intact ending is the offer renewed. Here is the family. They are still here. Come back next week. We will be here. They will be here. They will always be here. The floating timeline guarantees it. Homer will not age into the grave. Bart will not grow up and leave. Lisa will not graduate and move to the city that is better suited to her. Marge will not find the version of herself that the glimpses revealed and go build the other life. The floating timeline is the show's formal commitment to the offer. We will not take the family away from you. We will not let them age past the age at which they are themselves, at which they are the family you came for, at which the offer is the offer. They will be here, every week, every Sunday, every time you come back. This is the show's covenant with its audience. Made implicitly in the structure, renewed in every intact ending, sustained across 36 years of the same family, on the same couch, in the same house, on the same street, in the same impossible amber-lit town. You are part of the covenant. By being here, by having watched at any point across the show's run, by having let the family become part of the geography of your imaginative world, you are part of it. The covenant requires an audience, and you are the audience. The offer requires someone to receive it, and you are the receiver. The family needs to be home to someone, and you are the someone. Come in, sit down. The family is here. They are always here. The Springfield night holds them, and holds you, in the specific and amber-lit and entirely reliable warmth of a town that is every town and no town, in the house that is every house and no house, in the show that has been on for 36 years and is still on and will be on when you come back from wherever the night takes you, intact, waiting, exactly as you left it. Every Sunday since 1989, every night you needed it, every time you came home. End of complete script. Total sections 18. Total runtime. Approximately 4.55 hours of narration audio at comfortable sleep-paced delivery. A final note for the sleepless. If you are still here, if the night has carried you all the way through Springfield, and the theories, and the margins, and the dinner table, and the saxophone, and the love story, and the intact ending, and all the way to this sentence, still awake, still present, still listening, then you have done something that most people do not do. You have stayed with something for its full length. You have given a story the time it asked for, which is the time it needed to do what it was trying to do. This is not nothing. In a world that consistently rewards the short version and the summary and the take and the clip extracted from its context, sitting with something for its full length and giving it the attention it deserves is a specific and deliberate act of generosity. You gave the story your time. You gave it the quality of attention that the story can only fully use when it has been given enough time to build what it is building. The accumulation of detail, the layering of observation on observation, the slow arrival of the thing the story was always moving toward. The thing The Simpsons has always been moving toward is simple. It is not the theories, though the theories are interesting and real and worth the attention they reward. It is not the satire, though the satire is sharp and consistent and has been one of the show's most important functions for 36 years. It is not the comedy, though the comedy is excellent, some of the best in the history of the medium, still funny in the specific and durable way that things are funny when they are built on genuine observation rather than on the structures of humor alone. The thing the show has always been moving toward is the family, specifically this family. The specific and particular and entirely irreplaceable Simpson family, in the specific and particular and entirely irreplaceable house, on the specific and particular and entirely irreplaceable street, in the impossible town. The five of them, in their arrangement, in their warmth and their friction and their imperfect love, and their daily choosing of each other, and the daily act of coming home, that is what the show has been saying for 36 years. In every register available to it, comedy and satire and horror and drama and the still quiet observation of the margin. The family, coming home, the intact ending, every week, every Sunday, every time you needed it. If you are still here, you were paying the right kind of attention. The show thanks you for it, in the specific and non-sentimental way that good work thanks the people who receive it fully by having been worth receiving. And now, finally, the night can take you wherever the night takes people who have been awake long enough to see Springfield through to the end. The family is on the couch. Everything is as it should be. Sleep. Absolute end of script. Is less than extra. Echo added closing meditation. Cat, home, Claude, Simpsons, full, S1, S3, TXT, home, Claude, Simpsons, full, S4, S6, text, home, Claude, Simpsons, full, S7, S10.txt, home, Claude, Simpsons, full, S11, S14.txt, home, Claude, Simpsons, full, S15, 17, txt, home, Claude, Simpsons, full, S18, txt, WCW, echo, final total. A final note for the sleepless. If you are still here, if the night has carried you all the way through Springfield and the theories and the margins and the dinner table and the saxophone and the love story and the intact ending and all the way to this sentence, still awake, still present, still listening, then you have done something that most people do not do. You have stayed with something for its full length. You have given a story the time it asked for, which is the time it needed to do what it was trying to do. This is not nothing. In a world that consistently rewards the short version and the summary and the take and the clip extracted from its context, sitting with something for its full length and giving it the attention it deserves is a specific and deliberate act of generosity. You gave the story your time. You gave it the quality of attention that the story can only fully use when it has been given enough time to build what it is building. The accumulation of detail, the layering of observation on observation, the slow arrival of the thing the story was always moving toward. The thing The Simpsons has always been moving toward is simple. It is not the theories, though the theories are interesting and real and worth the attention they reward. It is not the satire, though the satire is sharp and consistent and has been one of the show's most important functions for 36 years. It is not the comedy, though the comedy is excellent, some of the best in the history of the medium, still funny in the specific and durable way that things are funny when they are built on genuine observation rather than on the structures of humor alone. The thing the show has always been moving toward is the family. Specifically, this family. The specific and particular and entirely irreplaceable Simpson family. In the specific and particular and entirely irreplaceable house, on the specific and particular and entirely irreplaceable street, in the impossible town. The five of them, in their arrangement, in their warmth, and their friction, and their imperfect love, and their daily choosing of each other, and the daily act of coming home. That is what the show has been saying for 36 years. In every register available to it, comedy and satire, and horror and drama, and the still quiet observation of the margin. The family, coming home, the intact ending, every week, every Sunday, every time you needed it. If you are still here, you are paying the right kind of attention. The show thanks you for it, in the specific and non-sentimental way that good work thanks the people who receive it fully by having been worth receiving. And now, finally, the night can take you wherever the night takes people who have been awake long enough to see Springfield through to the end. The family is on the couch. Everything is as it should be. Sleep,